The sun was already hiding little by little, adding a stunning glow to the castle that was in the middle of the forest. The castle was huge and had a couple of buildings, so to speak, and there was also a beautiful garden and many flowers. I wonder who it belonged to. The girl walked around the castle looking for the lord. She walked around the stone statues, which was a lot. The territory is huge, but the girl walked further in search of the little lord. At one point she stopped. It seemed she had managed to hear or see something. Perhaps she had found what she had come for. The girl was in no hurry to get closer. She froze for a couple seconds and looked around. The girl approached a huge stone sculpture. Compared to her, the girl looked like a child. Turns out she had found the person she was originally looking for. A smiling boy jumped out from behind the statue. He was happy that the girl had found him. It turned out she was his mentor. His eyes lit up and he seemed to like it all. He was beginning to ask how his mentor had managed to find him in such a huge castle. But in the girl's opinion, the answer was obvious. She thought about what would happen if the boy found out she could read minds. She didn't have the kindest thoughts in her head, but she gently placed her hand on the little lord's head and stroked his soft hair. The girl began to smile at the boy and answered the question evasively, referring to the fact that she was his mentor and would always find him. She was hiding something, and to seem the little lord was in danger. She kept stroking Fried, that's our lord's name, on the head, and he looked at her in surprise and could not understand how she could find him so quickly, because he had chosen the place so well. The mentor decided to continue playing hide-and-seek with Fried, but this time he was driving, and it seems that she did not have the purest thoughts about him, because she realized that he belonged to a family of vampire hunters. When he didn't see her, the girl's eyes were filled with contempt and anger. She played her role so skillfully that it was hard for a child to suspect anything wrong. She smiled, but not as she smiled at the boy. She smiled maliciously, showing with all her appearance that the game will not be ordinary, and it seems that she is here for his soul. The boy counted to 100, hoping to just play hide-and-seek with his mentor, but the girl was not going to hide at all. She stood and watched Fried count 100. The boy counted from 100 to 1. The girl had plenty of time, considering that according to the rules, eyes must be closed. And the Lord seems to be playing fair and trusting her. The girl looks at the Lord again with disdain and scrolls through the thoughts of what will happen to him when he does find her. She was being radical. Is the boy in danger? But it's not as simple as it seemed. For some reason, she wanted him to be done with her as soon as he found her. But why does she look at him so contemptuously? Why did the girl come to him specifically? Didn't that mean he was the only one who could kill her? It was raining terribly outside, the drops hitting the water forming small waves. It was dark, but the moon was shining very brightly. There were no cars or people at all. It seemed someone had jumped into the water, and this girl felt all the cold and pain that followed the jump. She thought it would all be so much easier. She tried to reach for at least something with her hand, but she had a bad sense of where she was even. Neither mind was blurred, and she herself was lost. She could barely breathe, the pain radiating down to her bones. The girl begged. She begged everyone who existed. All she wanted was death. Only she could give her long-awaited peace now. The girl felt like she was sitting at the bottom of a river. She held her head, not realizing how she had managed to survive at all. She had jumped to die, but so why was she still alive? Her hair was rising with the waves. Something was changing. The situation had changed, but the girl obediently accepted the reality, because now she could die. The girl abruptly found herself on the bed, and the first thing she felt was a terrible headache. It was like she was splitting up. She started looking around to see where she was, but so far there were more questions than answers. The building didn't look familiar to her. Initially, the girl assumed she was in a hospital, but then she dismissed that thought. She had no money to pay for hospital fees anyway, so it was for the best. Another speculation about her whereabouts arose in her mind. She decided that she was in the afterworld. She was not exactly happy to realize this fact, but later her attention was drawn to her own hands, specifically the gloves on them. She didn't dress like that, and she didn't understand where they came from. Her whole image was different. She didn't understand who had changed her, or where she was now, or for what purpose. This place was no longer like the afterlife. She didn't understand what was going on, but the thought that she was still alive and hadn't been able to finish what she had started. The girl considered herself a failure. because in addition to all the terrible things that had happened before her suicide attempt, she had not been able to kill herself properly as she wanted to. While she was thinking in her head about what a loser she was, she smelled blood. It was like the place was soaked with it. She could hear it so clearly. She sat and looked around. For some reason, the blood smelled awfully good to her now. It was like it was drawing the girl closer to her. The girl found the source of the smell. There was a bowl of blood on the table. It was as if she automatically went to it and started to drink it with such thirst as if she hadn't drunk water for a couple of days. She drank all the contents of the thought and threw it on the floor. All the blood that was there had been drunk to the last drop, and so far she couldn't even guess what had really happened to her. The girl looked around and walked as far away from that bowl of blood as possible. Her brain wasn't working when she drank it, but now it was slowly coming to her what she had done. Looking in the mirror, she saw the blood on her lips, the blood she had just recently drunk from the bowl. It was as if it was waiting for her, although it was. She wiped the blood from her coat and face, and was clearly unhappy with the events that were happening to her at the moment. Why had she drank that blood after all? The girl shouted with anger because she did not understand what had just happened and how she had decided to drink this blood. Meanwhile, it was raining outside. Having sat down at the table, the girl began to scroll through everything that she felt and saw while she was here. The house was cold and wooden and hidden deep in the woods. The basement turned out to be a slaughterhouse. That's where the blood that the girl had recently drunk was extracted. She still hasn't figured out why she drank it, but she's gathering facts. Her eyes weren't red before. She's just now noticed that her eyes have changed color and aren't quite natural. She had huge fangs on her teeth, which she had never had before, because she had always had perfect teeth, and in general, her fangs looked like vampires. No matter how many times she looked in the mirror, she saw herself in the image of a vampire, and the picture does not change. In addition, recently she greedily drank all the blood from the cape. All she realized is that this is not the afterlife, and she could not die. Even in such a small thing, she failed, and everything turned out wrong. After the girl jumped from the bridge, she fell into the body of an immortal vampire, and this fact did not please her. On the contrary, it made her mad, because her goal was death. She clenched her teeth and began to quickly think of a solution to the problem. She was not going to just give up. She wanted to bring it all to the end and end it all. The girl was very angry. She wanted to prove that she could die in this body and nothing would stop her. She would end it all and she would definitely die. First, she tried a silver knife. No matter how many times she cut herself, it gave her only pain, healed quickly, and in general, this method worked very badly. Later, she remembered that garlic scared away vampires, but no matter how much she ate it, nothing changed. She tasted great. She hung a couple of crosses on the wall, and she expected to hiss and die at the sight of them. But the cross on the wall was just a cross on the wall to her, and nothing else. The next method was tougher. She decided to stick a stake in the ground, aim with her heart, and plop down on it below. She was lying on the ground with the stake sticking through her heart, but she wiggled her fingers and sighed. It seemed that this method could not kill her, although there was a lot of blood everywhere, as if a huge animal had been slaughtered. As soon as she stood up, she felt a terrible pain, but nothing more. The wounds healed, and the pain even became less and less each time. The girl had survived again. It seemed strange to her that she had wounded herself in the heart and stayed alive. She had seen many vampire movies, and all the ways she had tried helped to defeat them. No matter how hard she tried, she felt pain and the wounds healed quickly. She began to wonder if she could even die. With these thoughts, she ran into the house and abruptly opened the kitchen door. She needed something. It seemed she had a new plan. She grabbed a huge knife that was lying on the table. She decided to try to hurt herself again. The girl hoped it would work this time. The knife was very close to her neck. She was going to stab herself in the neck with it. She thought it would kill her. There are ways to die even for a vampire. The knife fell down to the feet of the girl who was still standing on her feet. You could see that this time she didn't manage to die either. She was standing again, and her wounds were healing little by little. She looked at her hands covered in blood and realized that she was immortal. She could not die at all. No matter how many ways she tried, it was useless. Even though she was lucky enough to wake up after jumping off the bridge, she still wanted to die now. But the body she was in was immortal. This conclusion did not let her rest. But she didn't want to give up. But she still wanted to die. so she thought that if she couldn't die from her wounds, she would just find a new way to do it. And it seems that an idea came to her mind. She chose starvation, and it seemed to be the most painful attempt at death for her. Her thirst tormented her, and she had little physical strength left. But still, she stayed alive. It was more of a torture method than a suicide method. She had been starving for months, but because of the darkness, she didn't realize exactly how much time had passed. Even if she died, death by starvation was not a victory. Time flew by and morning came. The weather was just beautiful and there were lots of green trees around. The girl scrolled through all the thoughts about trying to die and realized that wounds don't even leave scars and heal quickly, and starvation is much more painful than a through wound. She went over to the table to look in the mirror, and the thought that there was no way she could die pissed her off, and she wanted to find a way quickly. In the reflection, she saw a beautiful girl with green eyes, with long dark hair, and not dressed in a gothic dress as she had been recently. At night, she looked like a creepy vampire, pale with white hair and red eyes, and during the day like a normal person with a blush on her cheeks and a normal eye color. She didn't quite like the image of a normal person, but she was surprised that her teeth were able to return to their previous state, and her fangs seemed to have dissolved. She had never heard or seen vampires change their appearance at night and become different. This was the first time she had ever encountered such a change. She couldn't accept everything that was happening here. She didn't understand much at all and didn't know how to proceed. And now she saw that she hadn't closed the stable properly. All the chickens had run away. Only the little chickens were left, and now she was left without food because she had been eating chickens before. She sat down and started feeding the chickens and realized why it was so quiet in the morning. Because the chickens had all run away during the night, but she didn't want to eat the chickens. The girl decided to go to the first floor and look for some spare food. Maybe there was something left and she could eat. But even on the first floor there was nothing. Only a huge amount of books and not a single crumb of food. The girl was very upset when she realized that all the chickens had run away and there was no food in the house at all. She did not want to touch the chickens. They were small and there was nothing to eat there. But a little later, the girl looked at the floor and there was something there that drew her attention. Did the girl find some food? She didn't find any food, but in a crack in the floor there was a handful of coins, which were very shiny. They were only slightly covered by a board, but it wasn't too hard to remove it. She picked up the coins from the floor, and an idea was beginning to brew in her head. The girl decided that she could use them. She could go to the village and buy some food at the market, even though she had never left the forest. She gathered all the coins in a bag and decided that she would go anyway because she needed something to eat and the chickens wouldn't grow up soon enough. The girl walked down the forest path intuitively. She didn't know where to go, she just walked her way. The forest was very deep, and it was a bit difficult for her to walk. She didn't know in which direction the village was, but she kept walking, and for some reason the hungry animals avoided her. Did they feel threatened? She saw the village and thought that maybe they had chickens, so she decided to continue on her way and buy more food at home so that she could go out less often. There were a lot of people. Everyone was walking back and forth with purchases in their hands. Some were happy about the small price, and some were calling to the merchants with different shouts. There were also a lot of children. They were playing tag, and the girl didn't like it at all that she met them. She didn't like all the children very much. She stood back a bit and was just going to look around to see where she was and who was around her. All the people were wearing strange clothes. She wasn't used to seeing such outfits, and she wasn't wearing the most normal clothes either. There was an unfamiliar language and unfamiliar faces. Nothing reminded her of her old life. The world was different. She became a vampire and got into a world she doesn't know. Now she was only happy that he didn't want to eat all these people around. She had no thirst. The girl saw the man behind the butcher shop and decided to go and buy what she came here for. She went to the counter and said she wanted to buy a chicken. The man started asking about types, but all the girl wanted was raw chicken, and that's it. The man started asking how much chicken the girl wanted and was carefully going to put her purchase in a bag, but he didn't look at her kindly. The girl took out 1 coin and asked the seller how much chicken she could buy with that coin. The man, for some reason, was surprised at the coin that the girl was holding in her hands. He immediately pulled his hands to the coin, but the girl bent her hand into a fist and held the coin inside. She repeated her question to find out how many chickens she could buy. The seller told the girl that for this coin, they could buy about 10 chickens. but for some reason he looked away and spoke very uncertainly, as if he was hiding something. The girl calculated that she could live about 2 months with this amount and seemed to be determined to buy from this seller, but she was not sure that for this coin she would buy only 10 chickens. She grabbed the vendor by the collar and pulled him closer to her, as if she realized he was up to something foul. She let him know she knew what he was up to, though she didn't quite know what she was up to. The seller pretended that he did not understand at all and asked the girl what she did not like in his words or actions, because so far he had behaved perfectly. The girl came even closer to the seller, and when she was face to face, she started to blackmail him. The seller deceived her only because he thought she was a foreigner with a lot of money who was just passing by and decided to buy groceries. The girl didn't know what the seller was up to, but decided to press him to the end so that he would reveal himself and tell her everything, what he was up to, and where he had lied. The man fell down and started kneeling in front of the girl, justifying that he was only joking. He also added that he had no change from the gold coin. He kneeled down and said how sorry he was for deceiving her, and the girl finally found out what kind of coin she was holding in her hands, and it seems that the past owner of the body was very rich. While the girl was thinking about the coins, she heard shouting somewhere nearby. There seemed to be some kind of commotion, and that's what caught her and the seller's attention. Some man had been kicked out because he wasn't paying for something. He was sitting on the floor talking about how he would have been kicked out anyway if he had paid, but the man couldn't wait any longer. The guy who got kicked out was really upset. It was his last place, and now he didn't know where to give in at all. Turns out it was the last place he could borrow money, but why would he do that? He approached the salesman and asked him who the girl was and if she could lend him some money, and he promised to pay him back. But the salesman immediately let Jack know that no one will lend him because everyone knows what a bum he is. The guy was offended by the salesman's words because he didn't consider himself a slacker. Jack introduced himself as a vampire hunter. He introduced himself very proudly, showing how proud he was of himself and how proud he was of himself. The girl immediately heard that he was a vampire hunter and came up to him because she was very interested in someone who could end her life. Jack once again introduced himself to the girl and told her that he was a descendant of vampire hunters. The girl immediately grabbed him. She seemed to want something from him. The girl dragged the guy along with her. No matter how hard he tried, she didn't let him go. She just dragged him along because she had something to do with him. He kept asking why the girl was so rude to him and kept repeating that he had no money. He thought she needed money from him. The girl only cared that he was too noisy. Jack was already sitting with tears in his eyes and almost begged for mercy from the girl, but she was only interested in one thing: her own death and nothing more. The girl at once showed the sack of gold coins to the lad so that he understood that he would get a lot of money. Jack immediately became enthusiastic and began to speak politely. The girl clarified whether the guy was telling the truth outside the shop. It was important for her to know that he was really a descendant of a family of hunters. The girl was glad that it was true, and she immediately began to ask if Jack knew how to kill a vampire, and she was very happy that she had a chance. The guy started talking about sunlight, though we already know that it doesn't work. The girl also tried aspen stake, but that didn't work either. The girl immediately let the guy know that these methods don't work. Jackie was extremely surprised and did not understand how this is possible, and immediately suggested the option of silver weapons. The girl was disappointed. She thought about letting him go. The guy didn't understand how all the ways he named couldn't kill a vampire because they always worked perfectly well with everyone. But he asked if the Moon Lords were those vampires. The girl was numb and frozen. She had no idea who they were, and she seemed to realize that her situation was getting worse. She just wanted to die. She mouthed "Lords of the Moon" over and over again. It seemed very familiar to her, as if she had heard or seen it somewhere. Her memory began to return. As soon as the girl's suspicions were aroused, she immediately checked the guy's last name and first name. His name is Jack Scheffel. He said his name and didn't understand what strange thing was going on with this girl. She behaved strangely, at times even aggressively and incomprehensibly. The girl looked as if she understood what was happening, but her expression was not joyful. On the contrary, there was only despair. All the events and names were very similar to those in the novel she had recently read, if she had died and found herself in the novel itself. The novel she found herself in was a romance about a vampire hunter and a saint. The girl remembered the plot clearly, so the situation was starting to become clearer. The main male character was Fred, the last survivor of the Scheffel family. Those ruthless vampire hunters. He was traveling and doing his job. Traveling to break the curse of the Scheffel family, who had to fight tirelessly to the end. The ancient enemy of Fred and his family was Luna, Lord of the Moon. She was the worst vampire in history to break the curse. He tried to defeat her, but failed and was badly injured. Cynthia is the one who saved him after his defeat. She saw him on his doorstep while doing work in the temple. When she healed him, he awakened as a saint, and they united. The girl remembered the events of the novella and was well disappointed that she became the villain in the novella. Was she really that bad in her lifetime? The girl remembered everything she had learned during her time here. The first thing she noticed was that she could change her appearance, human by day and vampire by night. She couldn't be killed with the things that vampires used to be killed with. But there was something else about the whole situation, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was. It all seemed strange to her. The girl thought that if she was the mistress of the moon, she had very powerful powers. She could even summon darkness and control it or hide in the shadows. She kept remembering the plot of the story and summarizing it, and the guy thought that she was very strange, and it was better to get away from her. The girl cheered up, because she remembered how strong Luna was, and decided that she was lucky. But in the novel, Cynthia and Fred would defeat Luna. As strong and immortal as the moon was, there was still one huge problem, and that was pain. The moon itself is immune to all wounds, except those inflicted by Fred and Cynthia. The wounds they inflicted didn't heal like the others, so they were constantly aching and bleeding. The girl realized that she would have to go through the same pain and agony as the heroine of the novel. The girl didn't quite like the fact that she would have to endure 3 years of pain and then die, and she could have just died by jumping off a bridge, but obviously something went wrong. The guy just decided to leave and warned her that he was leaving since she didn't need him, because the girl stood there thoughtfully and didn't talk to him. The guy was leaving and said that they would have a drink next time, but the girl didn't need a next time. She didn't let the guy leave and grabbed him by the collar. Jack was not satisfied with the girl's rudeness and let her know about it, because he thought that she was done with him and he could go about his business. But it was far from that. She didn't know what to do, but her position was precarious, so she was thinking up a plan of action. She noticed that the eyes and hair fit the description of the distinctive features of all the members of the Scheffel family. The guy folded his arms in front of him and asked the girl to let him go, because he didn't really like her company and wanted to move on. To the girl, the guy looked really disgusting. But she came up to the guy and immediately began to ask questions, asked if he had a family. But the guy was surprised by such a question. He was unclear what this girl wanted from him. The guy again boastfully reminded that he was from the 5th generation of Scheffels. He was proud to carry this surname, and every time he presented himself as if he was on stage. When it came to his marital status, he started to be modest because he hadn't found his woman yet. He thought that one day this man would appear right in front of him. The girl was disappointed by the guy's answers because she was expecting something different. She was surprised that this guy was Fred's ancestor. But in the girl got an idea. He thought that it is possible to really restore the family Scheffel. She was ready to do anything for her death. Fred went to look for the missing sword Scheffeloff, and the development of his skills was delayed because of wasted effort, because without the sword was no use anyway. The girl thought of putting her eyes on the family and keeping the sword from disappearing. She thought only of her own profit and her own purpose. And in this case, Fred should not work hard. He only needs to grow up to later kill the Moon Lord with the first blow, which is what the girl needed. She decided to take care of the family from generation to generation, although it seems crazy. But the girl has enough time and money. She is immortal after all. The girl was pleased with herself because she managed to think out a clear plan. And now it remains only to follow it step by step, and she will be able to achieve her goal. First, she needs to take care of the slacker Jack. He is her first goal. If he goes astray, then her plan will be much more difficult to execute. So the guy became the girl's first target. She never let him go, so she finally talked to someone other than herself. She walked up to the guy and was about to say something to him. She told him that first of all, Jack needed to change his thinking a bit. And really, Jack was being very irresponsible and untalented. The guy froze from incomprehension. He thought this girl was strange, and she said very strange things. That's where her long project began. The girl opened her bag with gold coins, which she had recently found in the house, She decided to interest Jack in this way, so that he would be near her. All the coins she decided to give to him to pay off her debts. The boy looked at the bag of coins that he held in his hands and could not believe that they all belonged to him. He expected to get just one coin. Jack wanted to thank the girl somehow, but she didn't care about that. She was pursuing her own goals, and was not satisfied with the fact that she had wasted a lot of time, although now the situation was clearer. But the guy was even more talentless than the girl thought. He spent all the coins she gave him on the casino. Instead of starting from scratch, he went on the same way. Later, he got drunk on wine and lay on the ground sleeping in a drunken stupor like the last drunkard. The girl didn't expect much from the guy, but even he managed to disappoint her. He turned out to be much worse than she thought. She had only one last resort. She had prepared a plan B in case the guy screwed up. The girl had been leading him somewhere since morning. He followed her and tried to get answers from her. He wondered where she was leading him since morning in this cold. While walking, he came across a skull, but he wasn't scared or surprised. He didn't seem to be a wimp, just very braggadocios and confident. But it was still strange to see skulls in the middle of the woods, so the guy wondered why they were there at all. But there was someone behind him. As soon as he turned around, he saw a huge monster several times bigger than him, its eyes glowing. The girl decided that a fight was the best option for such an idiot like him. It would awaken her resilience, ability to fight, and in general teach him intelligence. But the guy was weak and timid. The beast had no time to attack, and he was already up in the tree and screaming like a little child. The girl hoped that he would awaken Scheffel's strength in the fight, but nothing happened. But the girl didn't have much hope for that plan, because she expected him to chicken out and scream like a girl. Jack sat in a tree and begged the girl to save him. He had a lot of courage. He was boastful, but he didn't know how to do anything else but lose money and get drunk. After the girl decided to start training him, she decided that he should get hurt, and the guy, like a little boy, ran away and begged for help. The girl didn't want him to die. It wasn't in her interest, so she always saved him and helped him, though sometimes he pissed her off so much that she wanted to kill him herself. She rescued him and threw him back to the monsters, tried to teach him how to fight, but again and again he hid, ran away, begged for help, and climbed up a tree crying. But still the results were there. A year passed, and he gradually became stronger, more confident, wiser. There was no more fear in his eyes. He looked more masculine than a year ago. After a little more time, Jack became a strong and worthy vampire hunter. He had scars from the battles, but now he was not chased away, but welcomed with honor in every house. Jack's last moments were spent in his bunk, thanking the girl for her help, though he didn't understand why she had done all this for him, because she had made a decent man out of him. He asked her to do the same for his daughter. He was sure that she would not be lost under supervision, and he wanted his daughter to succeed too. His daughter's name is Maren Scheffel. She was much better than her father. She was smart and honest. The girls sometimes forgot that she was Jack's daughter at all. Maren, unlike her father, from the very beginning hunted monsters and even managed to organize some business, which recruited mercenaries and organized a stable support for the family. But Maren was not immortal either. After her death, Luna secretly supported the family so that her identity would not be revealed to future generations. The future generation of Scheffels were very talented, so she didn't need to interfere. Only Jack was an exception. Only he was a mediocrity. The Scheffeloff family gained noble status, acquired wealth and power, and around this time the Scheffeloff Nihil sword was created. The girls' efforts were not in vain. Nihil was smelted from the ores of a meteorite that had fallen to Earth, and this special sword was able to resist the Lord of the Moon. In the short story, Luna fought Scheffel and broke the sword into small pieces, which became a problem. Afterward, Luna distributed the Chadi to 13 generations and kept one for herself, but the joy did not last long. All this time, the kingdom wanted to get the power of the Scheffels, and under constant pressure and threats, the family got involved in a war against vampires. All those who bore the name Scheffel were killed one by one. Luna was not happy because her whole plan was falling apart. She couldn't let all her efforts come to an end. She had worked for 200 years for the family, and she wouldn't let them all disappear like that. As the war went on and the blood poured in, the Scheffels were brave enough to stand up for what was right. They wanted to win this war by all means, but wishes don't always match reality. The general died, and little by little the war began to calm down, and the rivers of blood dried up on the ground. The war was over. The Scheffel family came to the attention of the Duke family due to their great contribution to the conduct of the war, and so their status and respect in the empire increased. All this time, Luna's memories and feelings were fading little by little. She was forgetting more and more. Luna lost the memories of her past life. However, what remained with her was what had been with her from the beginning, namely the longing for death. Although it was getting weaker, it did not disappear. Since then, time had moved forward, and the moment Luna had been waiting for and protecting the Scheffel family for. Another descendant of the Scheffel family was born, and for the sake of this day, the girl had traveled all the way to the end of her life without even remembering it. He was named Fred, the child his father thought would fulfill his deepest wish. Fred Scheffel was the one she'd been waiting for all along. Luna remembered her death wish, but why she wanted Fred in particular was not entirely clear. The Scheffel mansion looked very huge and lively. It was very bright and had a lot of life in it, all thanks to Luna's efforts. The girl was happy that this moment had come. For over 200 years, she had been working to wait for this moment, and it had finally come. She came to Fred to make sure everything went right and he was okay. Then she could appear to watch him as she had watched his ancestor Jack. He was still an infant, always screaming, but he was her salvation, or rather her undoing, which she so ardently wished still. The girl looked at little Fred and held the little toy. She was tired of him crying all the time, but she must keep him safe. The boy really liked the toy the girl showed him, and he started to smile and didn't cry anymore. The girl entertained the child with the toy so that the boy would not cry anymore and would not get on her nerves. She was not very fond of children. The boy grabbed her finger. Something about the gesture was nice and sweet to her. She didn't like little kids, but she was willing to play with him. The strength in the child was still a little small, but the girl realized that if he touched her longer, something serious could happen, so she took her hands away. All she wanted was for the baby to grow up faster and finally fulfill what she was here for and what she had been with all his ancestors for. A girl walked into the nursery. She thought someone was near the baby and she cared a lot. She needed to check on him, but there was no one in the room. Luna's trace was gone. Only the curtain sheet let her know that the girl had been here recently with the baby. But the girl found no one, only a child playing with a toy. She thought it was strange because she heard someone's voice, and it was definitely not the boy's. The castle was lively as always. There was a lot of life, noise, and light. The garden was well kept, and there was calmness all around. The boy trained hard. He was trained as a true knight, a worthy descendant of the Scheffel family. Fred was only 7 years old, and he was already preparing to become a knight. His nanny was concerned that he was practicing so much, and she was worried that he was not practicing all day long. The girl looked at little Fred and worried about him so that he would not get hurt because he was practicing with real swords. Young Fred held the sword and was confident. His face was already patched up from all the training he had been through. While he was practicing, Luna was watching the boy discreetly somewhere in the distance. It was important for her to know that he was doing well and that he was the right one for her. Fred turned out to be the one she needed from the very beginning to achieve her goal. And even though he was a child, he already had a lot of strength, so all she had to do was wait. The others noticed it only now, but Luna saw everything and knew that he would grow stronger every year. The Duke of the family. Scheffel Cayley had been training him since he could walk. Everyone said he needed to rest, but the Duke didn't listen to anyone and kept training him. At the age of 5, Fred was already able to train on par with real knights, and at the age of 7, he was already beating the squires. Eventually, Fred's success exceeded the Duke's expectations. Luna decided that now she could have a little influence on the events, and the number of all the consequences would decrease a little, because that was the case last time too. One day Fred was just playing in the yard with a ball, and Luna got into his game a little. When the ball flew off, she made the mistake of throwing it back into Fred's hands. It could have hurt a lot. She had forgotten that no one was supposed to be around the Scheffel estate, and she had made her presence known by her action. So when Fred told her that the ball had come back to him, the Duke ordered a sweep of the neighborhood to see if there were any strangers around. So Luna corrected herself and decided to wait a little longer until Fred was even better. Besides, it seemed like just a blink of an eye compared to how long she had waited for this moment. In the original story she had read, Fred's talent was underdeveloped. He was even afraid to pick up a sword and couldn't really hold it. But now he had gotten proper training and things were different. Now all she had to do was just find a child that would give her the freedom she had long dreamed of and sought all along. She set out to find the child. The girl realized that there was someone in the forest and she was very unhappy about it. Besides, she could smell blood and sighs that were about to break. It was strange, for no one had ever been in the cursed forest before. She saw a man, and a very young one at that. He had blonde hair and was sitting almost exhausted, covered in blood, leaning against a tree. Opposite him stood a man with a sword in his hands. It seemed his target was a boy, who was barely breathing. The man with the weapon was telling him not to hold a grudge and he was going to finish the guy off. He told him that the guy should have known that it was bound to happen sooner or later, and in his opinion, it was better that it happened sooner. The man put the sword to the guy's neck and told him that this was the fate of his blood, and he had no personal grudge against him. It just had to happen now. Luna came closer, and the guy with the sword noticed her and started yelling to find out who was here. He didn't need witnesses. He ordered Luna to show herself, but she just stood back for now, watching what was going on around her. The guy was surprised that someone could get so close without being seen. He wondered who it was that strong. But the boy couldn't see who it was. Luna just told the guy to finish what he had to do and go away. She was in a good mood and let him go as if she never saw him. The man was holding a sword and talking about how there couldn't be anyone in this forest. He thought it was someone who should be watching over the prince. Luna decided to show herself to the man. She came out from behind the fog. She had an angry look. She was showing the guy dislike for his multiple questions. The guy recognized the Lord of Darkness, but he didn't even have time to say her name out loud. The girl decided to deal with him because he was pissing her off a bit. And the guy was running away too fast and asking a lot of questions and making a lot of noise, which annoyed her. She couldn't let him go and forgive him, looking at his face. She stood beside him, pulling him to pieces. She couldn't let word spread that there were vampires in the forest because the Scheffel family might arrive. And since Fred was born, she didn't want that, so she called the wolves that were in the neighborhood and gave them permission to finish him off and eat what was left of him, because she didn't care what happened to the man, and wolves are hungry. They came up to the guy who was sitting dying leaning against a tree, sniffed him out and wanted to finish him off. But they were frightened by the approach of the Lady of the Moon and began to retreat from him. After all, they couldn't cross her because she would do to them what she had done to the guy they had recently sat down with. The girl angrily told the wolves that this guy's time had not yet come and let them not touch him. She looked at him with her arms folded, not liking the whole thing. The wolves ran away, taking with them the man who had recently swung his sword in front of the boy's face. The guy was still conscious. He noticed the girl, but he couldn't see who she was, and he could not make out a blurry vision. The guy could only see the girl's outline and hear her. She said that he would die soon, though he knew it without her help, because the wounds were fatal. The guy held the wound from the sword and replayed in his head the words of the stranger. The guy was not to talk now, and the strength to speak was almost gone. Life was leaving him little by little. He looked at the girl and realized that his time was running out, and he was dying an agonizing death, feeling all the pain from the many wounds that the man had inflicted on him. The guy could see a little bit of the girl, namely her shining silver hair and red eyes. It reminded him of something, but he had no strength left. He saw her hazy. Luna sat down next to the guy and looked at him. She was curious about the moment of death. She wondered if he was seeing his last vision now. She was jealous of the guy and said it out loud, because she wanted to die for so many years and how much she did to get it. But the guy was enough to be wounded with a sword. The guy looked at the girl and didn't realize that she had forgotten what she needed here. He heard her, but saw her blurred. He heard her jealous of him. But he didn't understand at all why she was jealous of him, or how anyone could ever be jealous of someone who was in a position like him right now. She was like a ghost to him. Meanwhile, the men were combing through the woods looking for someone. They went mile after mile and never found what they came into the woods for. But they found drops of blood, like it was falling from the sky, because there was no body, no remains of things, just a pool of blood on the green grass. One of these people said that looking at the amount of blood, the second prince was dead, but the girl who found the blood wasn't going to believe it. She was very angry that maybe her companion was right, and the second prince was no longer alive. It was important to her to find either his remains or proof that the prince was dead, or they would fall into disfavor with both parties. They wondered what the situation in the palace was. for both the queen and the concubine wished to see the second prince they were now searching for. Thoughts of that second prince gave the girl an uneasy feeling, for it did not bode well if so. She wondered who could be the cause of all these events. She was talking about a woman who was not attached to her bloodline, but it was strange that she could watch the suffering of the others. But what she cared about now was that she could not see her brother anymore. She cared that he would never show up again. If so, the palace would be drowned in blood. In the end, Luna took the wounded boy to her. He slept in bed for the time being. Why exactly she did it, she didn't understand, but she couldn't change anything. The girl looked at the boy and envied him, because in this world, everyone can die for any reason. But she, as a bad luck, does not have this advantage or disadvantage. Everyone thinks differently. While she was watching the boy sleep, Luna realized that she was very hungry, but she couldn't afford to eat the boy she saved. Then there was no point in it. Luna kept repeating how jealous she was of the guy and everyone else. Everyone in this world can die at any moment, which she unfortunately can't do for years. It was the second time she was in such a situation. The first time she decided to revive the 7 Scheffel. This time she saved a strange guy from death. This time she got caught again and put new duties and responsibilities on her shoulders. Why she did it, she didn't know yet. Luna felt sorry for him and everyone else, so she helped the guy. The guy was still fast asleep. He didn't open his eyes and didn't move. The girl turned to Dr. Jamin. He just told her that everything comes and goes and Luna should order a new beautiful little coffin for her new guest, which she didn't want to do. Luna just let Gemina know that there was no corpse and the guy was alive. The doctor was very interested to see a live guy who had been out for a couple of hours. The doctor came up to the guy and said that he had to examine him thoroughly and check all his wounds. He started to pin his hair up to start the examination. He dragged him along, but the girl didn't like the idea. She tried to stop him and yelled at him that he didn't need to examine anything, but he was only trying to fix him. The girl collapsed on the table from exhaustion. She had nothing else to do but wait. There was nothing she could do to help the doctor. Dr. Gemin himself turned out to be the best researcher of all the monsters in existence, so he was very convenient to Luna. When it comes to monsters, Dr. Gemin collected all the materials he needed for his experiments. Everyone else was afraid of monsters, but the doctor was interested in researching them. People hated Dr. Gemin, and of course called him crazy because of his unhealthy interest in monsters. But it was Luna who saved the doctor when he was captured by the sectarians, because he is the best character in the novel in her opinion. He's a mad scientist, a character who initially opposes the protagonist, but later becomes his main ally. Luna originally wrote down a short retelling of the story because her memory was fading and she could forget everything, and she needed to follow the plan. According to the story, the doctor was a great assistant. He created a tranquilizer for the monsters. This drug will destroy human-turned vampires, and it suppresses werewolf conversion. This drug made him valuable to everyone. He also created a poison that could kill the Moon Lord, and that's why Luna saved him, because he could also help her. She did everything because she wanted to die, and saving him was no exception. Luna thought that no one could compare to Gemin and his research on monsters, because it had brought much-needed fruit for all mankind. Luna wanted to find another child, but it would take more time and effort to find one, so she didn't think about it seriously yet. The girl was distracted from her thoughts by the knocking of the door. It seems that the doctor had finished checking and examining the patient. Dr. Gemin said that the boy's body was just getting used to the environment and that he would be fine. He laid the guy on the bed, and the girl asked the doctor to explain clearly and briefly. She was also surprised that he wore a medical gown, at least not to cut anyone. The girl wondered how old he was, but until he woke up, she could only guess. So she decided to ask the doctor how old he looked. They estimated the boy to be about 12 or 13 years old. The doctor was still examining the boy to check everything thoroughly. Gemin's conclusion was that he was growing up. That's what he was really going through. Luna was surprised by the doctor's answer. It didn't explain why the boy was still not recovering, although by her standards he should be fine by now. As the doctor said, according to his research, vampires go through 2 stages of growth before they reach the final result. They are like caterpillars that abruptly turn into butterflies. The guy was a vampire. The girl wondered when he would wake up, but the doctor couldn't say for sure. The guy needed to adjust to the body, and then he would be able to function. This was the first time Luna had ever seen something like this, but she was also frustrated that Dr. Gemin never said when the guy would wake up. She would just have to check on him and wait it out. Dr. Jemin examined the guy to get a rough idea of when he would wake up. He immediately noticed his eyes. They were already red. He was turning into a vampire. The doctor asked, "Did Luna have any relatives or any connection to someone in her past?" The girl said no and didn't understand why he asked. The doctor was curious what Luna was going to do with the child. He wanted to take him with her when he woke up. She could use the company, and she couldn't leave him. She was already responsible for him. Dr. Jemin approached the girl and told her to take him too. If she was going to take the boy, he was very happy when he said that. He wanted the boy to be his model this month, and Luna only thought that this man had only experiments in his head. He only thought about his research. Earlier, Luna brought him corpses of monsters and he would trade them for medicine. That's how he got samples for his research and various experiments. In the novella, Fred was the first to provide Jemin with materials. But to get the doctor's research results, the girl beat him to it and started providing the doctor. Luna didn't think Jemin was stupid after all. She hadn't worked with him that little. Luna pondered if this boy was such an important specimen for the doctor's experiments. After all, she also benefited from him continuing his research. Luna is now bonded to the boy, and she thought about using him to make more progress in monster research. But is that a wise decision? Dr. Jemin was eagerly waiting for an answer. He was at the ready for any answer she would give him. Oh, he himself was hoping for a positive answer. After all, there was a piece of Luna in the boy. But the girl firmly said no, which shocked the doctor a bit, because he wanted to get the boy as a sample. But Luna couldn't do that. The doctor could create something new for 3 months and didn't understand why Luna wasn't interested, but she told him to forget about the guy. The girl decided that there was no such moment in the original story that she used people in research, so she was afraid to change the course of the story. The doctor wasn't very pleased, but thought there was no point in asking. Little is known about vampires, which are unique in themselves. But so far, only one thing is clear, that no one can kill them, and the girl checked it already on her own experience. The main vampire is the Moon Lord. The doctor said he saw her once and his legs went wobbly, but she's the strongest of them all. Her power completely suppresses the will and makes people her puppet, and it frightened the doctor. Her indifferent gaze roused him as if he had drunk ice water. The girl approached Jamin with a request to make a deal with him, because she knew who he was and what benefits she could get from him. The doctor himself could not refuse such a deal, and besides, he had Luna herself as his accomplice, and that would give him a lot. She wanted the poison that would kill her. 7 years had passed since then, and now he was asking her to take a chance and try to use the guy in research and testing. But the girl said she wasn't interested at all. She lied, but she couldn't risk it either, because it was unclear how much she could change the course of events. Jemin was wondering what the girl was missing, because if she wanted, she could get a lot of money and power. But Luna was angered by the doctor's question, and she wanted to understand what Jemin meant when he said such a thing. Dr. Jemin wondered why she wanted to die. After all, with her power and abilities, it's not necessary. Besides, it's weird. But before the doctor could even hear the answer, Luna immediately used her power against him, because he shouldn't have asked such a question and minded his own business. Jemin had gotten enough from Luna. The blow wasn't strong enough to kill, but it was gruesome and there was plenty of blood. The doctor was pleased by such a gesture. He was glad that she hadn't changed a bit, and remained exactly the same tough and ruthless one. Luna let the guy know that she only let him live because he was Dr. Jemin, and if he was useless to her, she would have killed him long ago. Jemin thought she was a monster. She had the same look as before without any emotion or sympathy. He immediately apologized and even remembered their first meeting, which was 7 years ago. A lot of time had passed, but everything was the same as it was then. Jemin realized that she wouldn't kill him until he created a poison that could kill her. But if the poison works as it is, there will be no one to kill him. So he was calm, but Luna strongly advised her not to provoke her, because he can feel the pain. Jemin actually provoked her on purpose and realized that Luna had noticed. He told Luna that he understood everything now and he would not torment her anymore. It was in his best interest not to make Luna angry. It was getting dark and raining outside. It seems that in the cursed forest it rains all the time, no matter what happens outside the cursed forest. The girl was taking care of the guy while he was sleeping in bed and going through the transformation phase. She felt responsible for the guy, so she was watching him. Luna was looking at the guy, and something about his appearance confused him. Something was wrong, and it all made her very wary. After all, the guy still hadn't woken up yet. Jaemin said that the guy wouldn't wake up soon, but it had been 3 years since that day. Luna didn't think it would be that long. Luna thought about Fred. By her calculations, he was about 10 years old by now. He was halfway to growing up and becoming a hunter. The last time she had seen him, he was already quite a strong and capable child, and he was certainly much stronger now, and she should visit Fred more often. Meanwhile, there were people gathered outside Fred's bedroom door. They were trying to lure him out of his room with his favorite cake. Something was going badly wrong. Fred sat in his room with his head bowed on his knees and ignored all the words being said to him on the other side of the door. They were asking him to show himself for just a little while. Fred didn't open, and Luna decided to visit him. She hid behind the backs of people, but he still didn't open. The girl just watched from the sidelines. She wasn't allowed to interfere. She watched and didn't understand what was going on here. Fred didn't leave the room, and everyone else was waiting for him under the door. Luna watched. It was strange to her. It had been 3 years, and she didn't understand what could have happened during those 3 years that the boy locked himself in his room and didn't come out. She remembered the novel about the 2 lovers who would destroy the Moonlord, but for that to happen, they had to meet first. At this rate, it was unlikely. The girl had waited hundreds of years for this to happen, and now things weren't going according to plan. She decided she had to make things right. There was no choice but to intervene, but what would she do? She wasn't going to attack everyone around her, was she? The man talked about the statues in the mansion. The first was a statue presented by the great supreme master of the great temple of Gyewa. The low black obsidian was modeled after a nihil, a precious sword that is passed down to the family from generation to generation. It is said that with the blessing of a Holy Spirit, this sword can slay any monster, though the girl already knew all about it anyway. Scheffel walked around the mansion and spoke proudly about his family, though the girl knew a lot of things herself, because thanks to her, they had it all now. The man talked about the Knights of Light, all of them not even realizing that their nemesis is right now in their home and right in front of them. The girl opened the door, and as it turned out, they were already waiting for her. She decided to intervene and is already acting to control the situation from within. She was met by a handsome man. He was elegant, nicely dressed, and very polite. His name was Benjamin Scheffel. He had gotten a letter of recommendation. That's why he invited the girl. He asked if she liked it here, but the answer was obvious. Benjamin had heard that the girl had a connection to the Hernon family, and the girl immediately confirmed this information. She said it was important to be hired. She said she had previously tutored Lord Hernon's children, which added to her professionalism. Benjamin was upset that he only found out about her now. The girl already had an answer for him. She said that the Duke's family keeps its secrets. That's why he hadn't heard about her before. The Hernon family is a prestigious family. They are the Emperor's favorites. But the history of the existence of this family was short. In addition, because of their secret activities, not much is known about them. It was rumored that they even sold their soul to the devils. Just because of the fact that little was known about the family, the girl managed to hide her identity from the Scheffel family. The man was generally pleased with the girl, but decided to make sure she was aware of the laws of the Scheffel mansion. He hired her after all. The girl was glad that all her efforts were not in vain, and now she is sitting in the Scheffel's house without hiding. Benjamin decided to ask the girl if she knew about the rumors about his son Fred. Something was obviously wrong with him, because his father had turned dark when it was mentioned. The girl confirmed that she had heard a little, and how she knew that Fred had a serious illness, though that was not entirely true. Benjamin Scheffel was surprised that people were talking about a serious illness, but it was better than everyone knowing the truth. Benjamin walked the girl to the guy's door. He thought it was better for the girl to see what was going on with the guy and draw conclusions for herself. He knocked on the door and asked if Fred was asleep. He also let the boy know that his new teacher was here and they should get acquainted. Fred said that he didn't need a teacher, and the boy's father tried to calm him down and restore the necessary contact with him. Luna analyzed the boy's voice, and judging by it, he was fine. Besides, he is in contact at least verbally with people. The girl apologized for the intrusion and entered. The place was scattered and a mess. There were books, used paper, and sometimes shards on the floor. The boy sat with his head bowed on his knees. The girl introduced herself as Lunye. She let the boy know that she was now his new teacher. She spoke to him carefully and politely. Lunye talked to the boy. She tried to distract him with the fact that they would be reading and studying together, but Fred was not satisfied. He was already taking the book in his hand and asked her to go away. Lunye stayed where she was, so the guy threw the book that was lying next to him right at her, asking her to disappear. The girl got the book right in her face. It was good that it wasn't too thick. In that case, it would have hurt more. Even though she couldn't die, she still felt the pain. Lunye decided not to pay attention to this gesture and just opened the book that had recently hit her in the face. She only asked the guy if he had read it or not. Fred was surprised by this reaction of the girl, but trying not to show it, the girl slammed the book and thought about what she should do next with him. She'd worked hard to get here. She'd waited too long for him to kill her. Fred decided to apologize for throwing the book at the girl after all. He wasn't a horrible kid. He just had something wrong with him. Lunye was glad that the guy decided to talk and even smiled, but he was still asking her to get away from him. Fred let it be known that if the girl didn't leave, she could get hurt, and it seemed that was exactly what he didn't want. Lunye was flattered that the guy was so worried about her, but in the back of her mind, she was waiting for the guy to tell her what the root of the problem was, why he wouldn't leave the room. The girl decided to stroke the guy on the head, but he didn't like this gesture. He watched the girl's hand approaching him and was even scared. He hit the girl's hand so that she got away from him, and the girl was surprised by this gesture. She didn't know that he became so aggressive. Fred asked Lunye not to get close to him because he didn't control his power and he could hurt her badly. That's why he closed himself in the room. The girl was not afraid of him. On the contrary, she put her hand to his head once again and started stroking him to show that she was not afraid, and she was not scared because of his power. Lunye asked the guy if he was sick or just hurt, but he was interested in the girl's hand because he had hit her hard enough and could hurt her badly, even though he didn't want to. Lunye showed him her hand to make sure the guy was okay and just tingled a little. Fred looked with guilty eyes at the hand he hadn't hurt much. Fred was finally talking. He had a lot of people coming to him, and adults and children. He didn't want to hurt them, but his power was uncontrollable. Fred had a lot of power inside him. A normal person would have broken his arm with such a blow, but luckily, Lunye wasn't hurt much. Fred thought he was a monster for hurting people. The girl immediately started to convince him that he wasn't. His mom told Fred that he would be the one to kill monsters, but in the boy's opinion, he was the monster to kill. He remembered the events that had happened earlier. A man had grabbed his arm and was unhappy with Fred's behavior, and Fred in turn was offended by the way he was treated. The other man asked that the man not be so rude to Fred, but Fred's father decided that there was no other choice. Fred pleaded for him to let go, but he wasn't being listened to. He shouted with all his might to the guy not to dare to touch him. He was very angry and aggressive at that moment. After the boy screamed, blood came from his father's hand, and the boy didn't understand what happened, but he knew for sure that it was him who did it. Fred looked with guilt and couldn't believe at first that he could do such a thing. He was just angry, but he didn't want to hurt anyone. Everyone else in the room looked at the guy with apprehension, but were equally shocked at the outcome of the events. The guy crossed his arms in front of him and couldn't believe that it was him who did it. If it wasn't for him, all this wouldn't have happened. He realized that he had hurt someone and couldn't accept it. Lunye listened to the guy and asked one favor. She wanted him not to send her away. Fred looked at her with surprise in his eyes. Lunye reassured the guy, saying that everyone goes through this and just needs a little time and everything will fall into place. The boy believed her for some reason. Lunye looked at the boy with a smile and let him know that if he didn't like something, he could do what was right for him. The boy looked at the teacher with tears in his eyes, but for the first time he was calm. For the first time in days, he didn't feel like a monster and a monstrosity. Fred trusted Lunaire, and already allowed to stroke his head, he said that he understood the teacher, and it seems that Luna is starting a new story, and she is close to her goal. All the children of the Scheffel family were born with a curse. They must fight monsters for the rest of their lives. Thanks to their strength, the family rose to the title of Duke. They were all stronger than normal humans. But Fred had a special talent. All the children of the Scheffel family discovered their abilities in their teens, but Fred's abilities awakened much earlier. Now it became a big problem for Luna, because the boy was not ready for the powers to awaken so early, and his body and psyche are not ready for it yet. The boy still can't handle his power, much less control it, and it seems the effect has only gotten worse with age. While Luna was thinking about the boy, She was already standing at his door. Thanks to her resourcefulness, she was able to establish a friendly relationship with him after all. But he was still afraid of hurting her. As soon as the girl opened the door of his room, a chair flew at her. The guy didn't want to let her get close to him. Fred didn't know that Lunye was also unusual, and it would be much harder to hurt her. He would be much calmer if he knew that. The girl caught the chair and was told that he didn't calm down, and Fred immediately started apologizing. He didn't mean it. He just can't control himself. Fred folded his arms and with tears in his eyes started apologizing. He liked Lunye and was scared that he could hurt her. But Lunye wasn't that easy. She let the guy know that everything was fine and he had nothing to apologize for. But Fred didn't think so. He was ashamed that the girl was almost getting hurt because of him. The girl needed to calm the guy down, so she went over to him and started stroking his head with a smile so that he would realize that everything was okay with her and he had nothing more to worry about. When a human foot steps on Fred's territory, he involuntarily becomes defensive and won't let anyone get close to him. It works as a defense reflex. It's a bit like the instincts of a beast, but if you think about it, the Scheffel family lineage has some similarities to monsters, so it's not strange. Maybe it's just because Lunye is a monster herself, but no one even realizes it. But still, monsters don't protect the people close to him. He survived such a strong force alone at the age of 10. But now, Lunye has nothing to regret. Because she was afraid to intervene, the situation has worsened. But as soon as the guy's body recovers, she will immediately carry out her plan and die by his hand. If she interferes in his fate, she will teach him to control his power so that he will recover faster. To begin with, the girl decided to start with a joint cleaning. She handed the guy a mop and let him know that now he would have to work a little harder. Fred didn't understand why he had to do it and didn't want to, but Lunye pointed out to him the splinters on the floor that needed to be cleaned, but Fred didn't mind them at all. Lunye knew how to convince him. She frightened him that if he hurt his arm or leg, he wouldn't be able to play ball like he used to. Fred lit up about talking about the ball and realized that after the cleaning he would play ball with Lunye, not alone as it was before. The girl opened the curtains and the guy was blinded by the sun. He wanted to say something to her, but she interrupted him. The weather was perfect, and the girl decided to cheer him up by telling him that they would definitely play ball in the yard as soon as they finished cleaning the room. They finally finished cleaning the room. It didn't look so sad and ominous anymore, but they didn't get to play ball just yet. As soon as Fred touched the ball, it immediately burst. But Lunye noticed right away that Fred was at least trying to control his strength a little bit, which was a good thing. He started to fall into the teacher's lap again and apologize. Lunye let her know it was okay as always, but Fred's strength was beyond the girl's expectations. She would need to find a sturdy ball for them to play with. She knew where to get one, but she didn't really like that way. She had no choice and went to get the ball after all. She needs to get the guy comfortable with her so he doesn't chase her away after a couple days. She didn't really want to come to this place, but she was at the gate and someone was there to greet her, as if they knew she was coming. A man came out and thought the girl wasn't happy with the job at all. The girl was laughing and seemed tense. He came at once and did not even send servants to meet her, but went out himself, giving her such an honor. The girl seemed to know him well. She used the first name. It was Count Hernon, the same one where she had supposedly worked as a teacher, and who had given her the letter of recommendation that had gotten her into the Scheffel family. Luna asked how he knew she was coming. Hernon let her know that it was his property and he always had to be informed. The girl explained the purpose of her visit. She also thanked him because it was thanks to his letter of recommendation that she was hired. The guy looked at her with disdain, saying that he had just done a small favor for an old friend and he would not help her a second time. Hernon decided to lead the girl inside. There were many servants around. The girl followed him. They were heading to his office to talk face to face. Luna noticed that there were far fewer servants. Hernon told the girl to come in finally and not to stand in the threshold. As soon as the door closed, Hernon fell into the girl's lap and began to apologize for his ignorant servants. It seems everything before this was a game. Luna made it clear that she was the one who needed to apologize for showing up unannounced. As Hernon thought that all the members of the Hernon family, including the mansion, belonged to Luna, but why would the family that had achieved the Emperor's favor say that? Luna couldn't bear to see such a disgrace, but there was still something noble about it, which was why she called herself a teacher of the Hernon family. The mansion was built for that very purpose, so that she could infiltrate the Scheffel family in a couple of years. She followed the chain faithfully because she knew every detail of the novel. It was Luna who founded the Hernon family, but she was sick of Count Hernon sucking up to her like that and kneeling before him. Bran Hernon is the founder of the Hernon family. The girl met him in the post-war years a long time ago. As long as there were no humans living here, she lived peacefully. But later, a bunch of refugees came to her area and deprived her of peace. After the war, however, the cursed forest that had been Luna's home became a normal little forest where many other people lived. Luna decided that she needed to protect the forest as her home, and she thought that no humans would come here. That's when she met Bran Hernon. He was tied to a wooden pole with a huge pile of firewood underneath. He was considered a monster because of his red eyes and was going to be burned at the stake, like everyone did in those days. Everyone shouted that he was a monster and should be burned, and the moon just watched the circus from the sidelines. Bran was an ordinary man, but people thought he was a monster because of his red eyes and brilliant mind. They believed that his existence would bring a curse on the village. The appearance of a monster just when the advantage in a war is not on your side is the best way to take out your anger on someone. They tried to kill the man, but they didn't realize the real monster was around. They were all screaming for Bran Hernon to be burned at the stake, but stopped seeing what was going on around them. Luna decided to intervene. They were pissing her off. She grabbed the guy and in one move took him off the pole. After that, of course, her identity was revealed. But Bran wasn't scared at all and didn't run away from her. On the contrary, he knelt down and said that since she had saved his life, he was now her eternal debtor, and everything he got would belong to her. Everything in it belonged to her. Since then, the Hernon family has served her for generations, even though she didn't need to. She saved him because she wanted to. They were ordinary people with a bloodline that had nothing to do with monsters. They just had amazingly thick blood. That was what made them different. Hernon let the girl know that if she needed anything, he would get it for her. The girl had almost forgotten that she had come here for the ball. She needed a ball made of werewolf skin and Iranid webbing, the kind that could withstand Fred's blows. Hernon had all the materials. The girl just had to wait a little longer. Hernon marveled at the moon's generosity and let her know that he would start making the ball at that very moment. The girl said goodbye to Hernon for a short while and was even glad he was finally gone, for his super politeness was making her a little uncomfortable. The girl slumped down in her chair from exhaustion. She closed her eyes and just lay there. But not long afterward, she heard someone's voice outside the door. They were talking about the fact that there were guests in the mansion and wanted to see who was there. The girl recognized the voice, and so she listened to what they were saying. It was two kids. The guy wanted to see who was there, and the girl said he shouldn't open the door, because who knows who might be there. But Luna came out of the office and greeted the kids who were so afraid to go through the door. The two children recognized Luna and were not afraid of her at all. On the contrary, they were very happy to see her, and Luna could see that she didn't mind their company either. But the children realized that they were not quite polite, so they became quiet and waited for Luna to say something. They said they wanted to come out and meet their everlasting master. Luna was glad to see them, even though she was a little pissed off that little kids were addressing her like that too. Lewis had told Luna last time that the girl had a fever, so she first decided to ask how she was doing and if she was all right. Later, she turned to the boy and called him Judith and asked how he was doing. She was very nice to these kids, and they weren't afraid of her at all. The boy did not like that Luna called him like a little child. He was 8 years old, and he did not consider himself a boy, but a grown man, and asked Luna not to call him that anymore. The boy resentfully ran and called his set SRA, but Luna stopped him by bringing him a present. The boy was interested in it. He stopped and looked at her in surprise. He was curious about what Luna had prepared for them. She had a warm attitude towards these children. She liked them somehow. The girl showed the boys a small bag tied with a bow. The children liked it very much and were eager to know what was in it. They admired the bag that the moon held in her hands and waited for her to open it and show them what she had prepared for them. Luna bought candy especially for the children. The boy was surprised, but still interested. But when the girl asked him if he wanted some, he stepped away and said he didn't. He was still a little offended at her because of the way she called him. He justified his reluctance to try the candy by saying that there was plenty of it in the castle, but the girl still wanted the guy to try it anyway. She put the candy in his mouth, and the boy's eyes lit up. It was obvious that they were not like all the candies in the castle, and he liked them a lot. The girl noticed her brother's gaze and wanted to taste the candy too, because the boy chewed it so sweetly. The girl stretched out her hands and asked the moon to give her a taste of the candy that her brother liked so much. The moon put the candy in the girl's hands. It looked so light. The girl felt how soft the candy was and couldn't wait to taste it. These candies are made of thin sugar strands and flour. They used to be just used as snacks, but now they are considered candy. The boys enjoyed them, and Luna was glad they liked them. Initially, the birth of these twins was only a burden to Luna, for they are just ordinary children and no special use to them. And of course, all of their families saw it all have their own distinctive feature, namely their face shape and expression of emotions, which is what the moon liked. When they talk about loyalty, they have funny faces. They were no longer a burden to her. Now they were just as much a part of her life. But still, these children were very different from the rest of them. Louis could openly express her feelings. She was very sincere. Not many people can do that these days. Poet Luna liked her so much. Judith is a very energetic and impulsive guy. He seems to have an endless engine inside him, and he never gets tired. That's why she likes to make jokes about them. Judith is a secretive and reserved child, but when you give him something, he changes and becomes open. The boy brought the candy to Luna's mouth and told her to eat it too, but she didn't really want it. But it was important to the boy that she ate it with them. Count Hernon came back. He was looking for Luna. Looks like the ball making is over and the girl can go back to the Scheffel mansion. Count Hernon just caught Judith climbing across the table to feed Luna candy from her hands. He clearly didn't like it. He looked at the children and was not happy. It was obvious that the children were going to be punished, namely the boy. The children looked at the Count with fear, and Luna didn't understand why he was so angry with the children. They were just children. Luna asked Hernon not to swear at the children, because there was nothing wrong with his actions, and they were just having fun together. The Count didn't want to go against Luna's words. After all, she was his mistress too, so he couldn't pepper her. He didn't need to swear at the children in front of her. He calmed down and asked Judith to come to him, but his face was no longer angry. On the contrary, calm. Luna's words had affected him. The Count told the boys to be polite to their master and not to disrespect her. The boy let him know that he understood. After that, the Count sent the children to his room. Judith was leaving the room, and Luna told him to get himself another candy bar before he left. The girl sat next to her for now. The boy shouted to Luna that he was Jude, not Judith, and Lua even apologized for calling him that again out of habit. She gave Louis a baggie and told him to share it with his brother. Count Hernon immediately started to apologize for the children being rude to her, but Luna said again that there was no need to scold them. She just wanted to play with them. Hernon was amazed at Luna's condescension, but Luna felt that she was being deified and dusted off as if she were destroying them for disobedience. The children had grown so fast they were 8 years old now. Luna wondered if there was already a successor in the family, if someone had been appointed. Hernon decided that they would deal with this issue after the children had finished the academy and were a little older. It was too early to make such decisions. It seems to Luna as if only yesterday they were still unable to walk, but Fred was born and her plan went into action. Inexplicably, the girl managed to get attached to the twins and it became a problem. If Luna dies safely with Fred's help, the children will be freed and will no longer serve the monster, although they did not consider Luna a monster at all. Hernon entrusted the said ball to the best craftsman and will be able to send it to the girl tomorrow. They would do in a day what it would take other people years to do. Hernon placed a small box on the table and asked to take the contents inside it. It was a great gift for Luna. When she opened the box, there was a key, and she immediately wondered what the key was for and what it was for. The Hernons had prepared a small mansion for the girl, but it was not clear, for Luna did not need anything like that. Luna was very surprised that they had built a mansion for her and immediately decided to find out where it was. The mansion was built in the center of the city in a suitable place for her, although there are some old houses nearby. Herson apologized that there would be old houses next to her mansion that needed to be renovated. Luga asked Hernon, namely Alan, that's his name, to create a new identity for her, and after she bought the mansion, he arranged for renovations and hired workers to make sure everything was just right. If she had been told such a thing, she wouldn't have believed it. But here was the key in her hands. Alan had organized and done everything himself. Luna needed a place to hide right now, and the city center was a great option. It was hard to be without a person and a place to live. Alan also let her know that they would move the luggage that was left in the woods and provide a wagon. but the girl stopped him, saying that they should not do it. It was her problem now. Besides, there's something in the house in the woods that Alan Hernon doesn't need to know about, so she'd better handle it herself. And that was the guy who was still lying in bed in the mansion sleeping, going through the stage of growing up like Dr. Gemin said. Luna thought about just leaving him in the woods, but Alan insisted that the Hernines help the girl with the move and asked her to do the right thing. She agreed to Alan's terms, but she was alarmed by such insistence. After all, she could do it herself. And Hernon himself carefully make the girl's behavior. A little strange she was, as if she was hiding something, although it is so. Hernon was one of those who do everything perfectly, and Alan has a great instinct. He has been collecting information about her from generation to generation. He knelt down in front of her to show his authenticity to his mistress. Luna remembered the boy still lying in bed in the cabin in the woods. She wondered if he was awake, because with all the worries with Fred, she had not visited him. The boy at that time lay motionless in bed and slept for days on end. The moonlight illuminated his bed, and he slept so silently that he did not even seem to breathe. Even the blanket lay on him, as the moon had laid it on him the last time the moon had checked on him. Even his hair itself moved only in the breeze. He slept too soundly. But at some point, his hand that had been lying as still as ever all this time moved. More than 3 years had passed, and the boy seemed to be coming to his senses. There was a lot of light in the mansion. Every room was full of life and people. There was live music playing from some windows. Hernon told Luna that they had narrowed it down, but still couldn't find what she needed. It wasn't clear yet what they were looking for her. Luna was looking too. She didn't just blame it on the Hernon family, but what exactly were they looking for? They were still having a hard time finding it. Even though the Hernon family is the most informed family in the empire, it was always used to interrogate criminals. The representative figure among them was Dr. Gemin, the one who was supposed to create a poison for Luna that would kill her, in case the Fred option didn't work. Hernon said that he had a small pharmacy in the corner of the city, but there was only one person that Hernon could not find even in 10 years. But it was reckless to find a child that was not born yet. Besides, he was born in a commoner's family. This person is Cynthia, another main character. Before she turns 10 years old, 2 major events will take place. The first major incident has most likely already happened, and she should be at the orphanage. Luna wanted to find Cynthia before the second incident happened. But in the last 10 years, when the whole North was searched, she got a lot of information about her. That means someone intervened. They will soon have great results. Luna came to her hideout in the cursed forest. It had been too long since she had been there. Plus, she wanted to check on the guy, whether he was awake or not. Luna opened the door of her hiding place. It was unusually dusty, which is to be expected considering that the mansion had been empty for a long time, and there was not a single living soul there except for the guy who couldn't come to his senses. As soon as the girl entered the house, she went to check on the guy to see if he was awake, but the guy was still unconscious, as if there was no life left in him. The girl looked at him and couldn't wait for him to wake up. She felt a great responsibility for him and the fact that they were connected. But a little later, the girl looked away because something caught her attention, although the guy did not wake up, but she somehow believed Jamin and knew that he would wake up sooner or later. Her attention was attracted by a bookshelf, namely one notebook that was there. It was very important for her, and it helped her to follow her plan. It was a notebook with a summary of the novel, which she wrote down while she remembered everything, because time passed and she forgot many moments that happened, so she immediately reached for it. She felt it was necessary to make a copy, for more and more events were happening. She had already forgotten that she had tried to kill herself and ended up in the world of the novel that she had read last. Before the moon's papers became unreadable, she had rewritten everything on new paper and burned the old one. It was the one item she always carried with her. She thought that when she moved into the mansion that Hern had provided, this place would be no longer needed. But as she left, she felt a strange feeling, and unbeknownst to her, it was pounding in her head. Turns out it was the guy who woke up, and he immediately asked the girl who she was. Luna didn't expect him to wake up now. The guy forbade Luna to move because he didn't know her and felt threatened by her. She was still standing with her back to him. He asked Luna where he was, but the answer hardly pleased him, for he was in the cursed forest in her hideout. He was surprised at the girl's answer, but little by little he began to remember. He remembered that he was being chased, and one man was able to catch up with him. While the boy was remembering, another strange feeling came over the girl. It was all too confusing and unclear, this strange feeling. A guy who had been sleeping for over 3 years and suddenly woke up. Everything was mixed with a storm of emotions. The girl was caught up with these feelings. They were new to her, so she didn't understand what she was feeling. Meanwhile, the guy asked the girl where the man with red eyes and silver hair was, but Luna was not quite clear who he wanted to see. Turns out he wants the one who bit him, the boy described Luna, but she didn't immediately realize it. But he wasn't sure he'd been bitten at all. The sun had already risen, which meant that the girl's appearance had changed to human, so the boy didn't recognize her. But the moon wasn't going to hide. She threw off the hood of her cloak and told him that this person was right in front of him, and the more she talked, the stronger the feeling she felt became. She thought about how feelings were passed on from the creator to others. Anyone who amplified the emotions could explain them, but Luna didn't understand because of the overwhelming feelings and was confused, and the guy looked at her in surprise. The boy asked the girl who she was, but Luna was not going to answer the question and immediately concluded that he belonged to the type of people that annoyed her. But the boy wanted answers. He wanted to know who she was and why he was here, and what her relationship was with the man who bit her. It seems Luna never said everything. Luna said she is a subject, and this is one of the shelters she runs. So, as a subordinate, she doesn't know where the mistress is. She doesn't know what she is doing. Luna answered all the questions and let the guy know that once the questions were over, he could go about his business. But the guy was not going to just let her go, because he was not clear where and with whom. So he wanted to know more about what was going on. The guy wanted to know the name of the repaired, and the girl said her name, and immediately decided to ask the name of that annoying guy. His name is Lin. The girl asked the guy if he had any more questions and if she could go. He just woke up, but he was already a little annoying. It was important for the guy to know when the mistress would come. He thought the subordinate might know, but Luna didn't know when and warned that it might take a couple of years even. The boy smiled and didn't lose hope because he realized that sooner or later it would happen, and he would see the man who had saved him from death, even though there was almost no hope left. Lin wanted Luna to take him with her, but the girl just wanted to get out of here quietly without any new adventures. But it seems that it will not be so easy. Luna didn't understand why she should take him with her, but the guy said that since she was his subordinate, he needed to be near her to see her mistress. Luna was surprised that the guy was not afraid of the fact that they just met, and he wants to go with her to the end of the world, and the girl told him not to waste his time. The best thing for Lin was to build a new life and to thank God that he was alive at all. But his partner didn't like this arrangement. Luna thought she had succeeded in stopping him this time, for he was quiet and sitting silently on the bed. He didn't insist much, but she felt that it wasn't over yet. Luna saw the guy trying to hide his anxiety, but he wasn't very good at it. He almost died, and he was being chased by killers, and he had become a vampire overnight. She felt a little sorry for him and decided to take him with her on her own terms. She had to be very careful with him. To be more precise, Luna had 3 conditions. She had planned everything so that he wouldn't give her any trouble and inconvenience. First of all, Lin must not complain about the food, clothes, and blood. He would eat and wear whatever she gave him. Secondly, it was forbidden to attract unnecessary attention. It was also important that he did not disturb her at night, otherwise she would put him out on the street. The boy understood everything and waited for the last condition that she would say. The last one was the most important. If the mistress didn't come back within a year, Lin should start building a new life and not wait for it. 1 year was too little for Lin, but the moon let him know that if the mistress didn't come in 1 year, she wouldn't come in 2 or 3. Besides, the girl could provide him with a night's lodging, but she wouldn't take him with her anymore. Luna had no serious reason to set a year. It would be enough for him to learn how to be a vampire. Everything was new to him. During the year, he could learn many interesting things, and the girl with a clean soul and without guilt would be able to send him on a free voyage. And besides, if she's seen time, he'll be able to discover her identity sooner or later. The girl had laid out her terms, and the guy could go with her if he agreed with them. The girl went straight to the door, and Lin only had time to hold out his hand. He didn't follow her yet. It was as if he was frozen in one place. He seemed to be in the process of making a decision. He didn't know what he should do, but he had never been a vampire before. He needed help. He was afraid to be alone with himself right now. The girl was already walking through the forest. She sighed with relief as she thought that she had gotten rid of him, and now she could continue her way in peace. But she heard Lin's voice behind her back. He asked her to wait. It seems that he suited her conditions and he goes with her. The girl hasn't even gotten to her new home, but she's already gotten into a lot of trouble. And the most important one is Lin, who doesn't know that the person he needs is right in front of him. Moon's mansion was huge, as if Alan decided that she would live there with a huge family, but the mansion matched her status and showed power. The girl was sitting at the table in her huge mansion. There were not many people there, but that's what she liked. She could be herself. The girl was served blood in a bowl decorated with a flower. The blood was marvelously delicious and served in a beautiful dish, as if there was just ordinary tea in there. The blood was still warm. In other words, she had just been caught and had blood drawn immediately, all done for her pleasure. Alan Hernon hired a butler for Luna. She also handles all matters related to the mansion, like a manager, but that was to take a load off Luna's shoulders. The butler's name was Wendy. She was young and very respectful to Luna, because Hernon let her know how Luna was treated. Wendy always cleaned the mansion, so it was always shining as if it had been wiped clean, not a speck of dust anywhere. She also did her own gardening, so that the mansion was always surrounded by beautiful trees and flowers. She did everything for the beauty and comfort of the mansion. She even killed chickens every 3 days and offered their blood to Luna. But Luna decided long ago that she would not drink the blood of chickens. Luna was surprised that Wendy could easily wring the necks of chickens at such a young age. Didn't she feel sorry for these sweet little creatures? Wendy knew from the beginning that Luna was a vampire, but she wasn't afraid at all and didn't refuse to be her butler. In the end, Luna concluded that Alan hadn't hired her for nothing at all. Luna turned to Wendy again. It seems that Wendy was a little worried about whether she was taking care of the castle properly and whether Luna liked her or not. Luna asked Wendy if that child was not of the same blood as the girl, but didn't she herself know the answer to that question? Wendy knew the answer and was about to answer, but something was wrong. For a little sweat had broken out on her forehead and was falling down her face straight to the floor. It was obvious that she was nervous. Entering the mansion, Luna didn't see them talking. To be exact, the vampire boy never once left the room in all the time they had been here. They gave him chicken blood at the same intervals as Luna. Luna wondered if he drank the blood at all, because he needed it anyway. Wendy gave it to him every night, but it seems that Lini didn't want to drink it at all. He couldn't get used to the idea of being a vampire. Luna decided that it was her responsibility to take care of this guy. Wendy immediately started to apologize because she thought she was doing a bad job. But Luna let her know it was okay, just that Lin was a bit of a temper. Wendy's hands were shaking. It seems she was afraid of not pleasing and worried about how she was doing her job. Wendy thought about the fact that the landlady had decided to do it herself, but she couldn't help thinking that it was her duty to deliver the food. But it wasn't fear of vampires. In any case, Luna sent Wendy out and let her know that if she needed Wendy, she would be sure to call her. Wendy obeyed and turned away. As soon as the door closed, she leaned against the door and stood like that for a few minutes. Wendy was too tense. But why? After all, she wasn't afraid of Luna. She felt bad that Mrs. Luna had asked her name today. For 2 weeks, Luna couldn't remember Wendy's name at all, though maybe she didn't think it was necessary to remember it. But even if Luna couldn't remember her name, this was the first time Wendy had had such kind and polite hosts. She treated her courteously and didn't allow rudeness. It was this respect that made her even stronger, this kindness and normal attitude even to the servants. That's what Wendy thought, because she'd never met anyone like that before. In the meantime, we went to the room of the newly turned vampire. It was unusually bright, but the guy wasn't visible. He was somewhere like a kitten. The guy was lying in bed, but he was very tired. But he wasn't really doing anything, he was just lying in bed. Lin had never thought he would have such a hard time getting up in the morning, but he thought it was a consequence of his transformation into a vampire, although it wasn't a consequence of his starvation. He noticed a newspaper lying very close to him on the table. For some reason, it caught his attention. Luna had put it on the table for him to read and find out all the news that had happened during these 3 years. Lin didn't know that he had been out for 3 years, but it wasn't so scary and surprising. Nothing had changed in him, except that he was a vampire. His body had been resting for 3 years, but he had been working on turning Lin into a vampire. He didn't hear any outside noise at all. All his thoughts that had been going around in his head for 3 years were just realizations of what was happening. But he thought it would have been better if he hadn't woken up at all. But he realized that nothing could be changed now, and he would have to accept reality and live with it. He heard footsteps coming towards them, but it was definitely not the butler. He recognized the manner of walking at once, though it didn't matter much who decided to come to him now. It was Luna. The girl let it be known that she dictated her terms, but the guy doesn't follow them even though he promised. It threw her off. She guessed that he couldn't be trusted, but for some reason she took it with her. But still, he complained about the food, for he didn't drink the blood Wendy brought him. The boy remembered all the terms, but he didn't think he'd broken them. He let Luna know that he wasn't complaining. He was very timid when he said all this. He seemed to feel guilty. But the girl was even more angry because she had seen it, and she knew that he didn't drink the blood that was brought to him. But he needed it. His body demanded it, and he had no choice. Lin just didn't want to drink it, even though he knew he needed it. Luna told him that his body demanded it, and there was no point in starving him now. He would get used to it in time. Lin reminded her that he couldn't complain. He seemed to want to tell her something else, but the girl didn't let him continue his thought. She slipped a vial of blood right under his nose and told him to drink it, because he needed it, and he had to fulfill all the conditions they had agreed on. The guy looked fearfully at the vial and the blood inside. Physically, he wanted to drink it, but psychologically, he couldn't afford it. He felt it would be the point of no return. He wondered where they got human blood in the first place. He didn't seem to want to drink human blood. He was afraid of becoming a monster, but didn't want to accept the fact that he already was one. Luna calmed the guy down and said that she got the blood from a doctor she knew, and Lin didn't need to make up any stories about killing people. The girl opened the vial, and the smell immediately began to tease the guy, because vampires smelled blood too well. She figured he wouldn't be able to resist. Lin's thirst caught up with him, and his fangs showed out. All he had to do was to take and drink the blood. His body demanded it, and sooner or later he would slack off. But he turned away and tried to resist the temptation, even though it wasn't necessary at all. He hadn't done anything wrong. He hadn't killed anyone. He just drank what was brought to him on a saucer. Luna decided to make him do it. After all, he himself had promised not to break the terms, and now he was doing just that. Even though she had already closed the bottle, but she was sure it wouldn't take long, her manipulations would work soon. Lin didn't care if he was starving or not. He wasn't going to drink blood. He tolerated it and didn't want to do it. He didn't care that his strength was gradually leaving him. As a progenitor, Luna understood his feelings, and hunger was no exception. However, she couldn't let that happen. Even if he tried to ignore it, Luna was still annoyed by the whole situation. He hadn't drank blood in 3 years, and she knew that he was feeling very thirsty. Luna immediately understood the reason why he had decided to give up blood. She was very familiar with the reason. She had done it for a couple 100 years herself. He was only giving up blood because he wanted to die. Luna remembered how painful it was, and she didn't want him to try to die the same way. Plus, knowing that vampires are very vulnerable to sunlight, he left the curtains open. Another vampire wouldn't allow such a thing, but he's no ordinary one. She was not wrong in her judgment, but the guy denied it. He said that he just couldn't drink blood, and he would rather starve. The girl decided to ask the guy a question directly. She wanted to know if he was really going to die this way. From the guy's frightened eyes, it was clear that she was right. The girl grabbed the guy's face, and she was very angry with him. She didn't care, and she didn't want to mess with him right now. He just needed to listen to her and stop acting like that if he was a vampire. She wanted Lin to realize that no matter how hungry he was, he couldn't eat, because she had tried it and it didn't work. Even if Lin starved for a month, he wouldn't die. He would just get exhausted. And after a year, he would lose control and go on the hunt. Lin was surprised that Luna knew so much, because he thought she was just an ordinary person. But Luna let it be known that she had been through such a journey herself, so she could tell from experience that this way doesn't work, although it's sad to realize it. Even people can go a week without eating and not die. Lin will just suffer, but definitely not die. This way, he is only making things worse for himself. Luna opened his mouth and poured blood into it. She let him know that as long as she doesn't die, he will live too. There is no other option. Lin was desperate to drink the blood because he had no choice. Luna forcefully poured the blood into him, and he would not be able to escape her grip. In the end, he took the vial from her and finally drank all of its contents himself. and no longer tormented the girl, but did as he should have done from the beginning. The girl looked at him, and deep down she understood him. She completely understood all his feelings. Not for everyone, immortality is a gift. For people like them, it is a curse. Luna dreamed of death, and if dying was as easy as Lin thought it was, she would have done it thousands of times. But for now, she can only dream of her death as she has been doing all these years. Dr. Jemin said that the probability of a family having certain traits of the owner, he didn't know exactly, but he knew that the smallest percentage was there. It turned out to be quite a high probability. This surprised Luna, rather interested to find out more about it. Jemin decided to ask Luna if she knew what the difference was, but it was obvious from Luna's face that she didn't know at all. She just looked at the doctor in surprise. Luna thought it was a waste of time to have this conversation, and she needed to get away from the subject without arousing any suspicion. But Dr. Jemin knew that she would not be able to avoid it, and she would not be able to keep herself from saying too much. Jemin was holding a branch that Luna had brought him, but the branch had been roughly cut, so she wasn't sure it would be enough. The doctor couldn't admire the branch. It was a raw branch of a divine tree. He didn't think he'd get to see such a thing. Luna looked at the guy in surprise. She thought it was just an ordinary branch. But this branch is more for research. That's why Luna took it out. The divine tree is grown by the royal family. It is one of the magic items. Not everyone can get it. In a realm inhabited by the strongest monsters, the artifact was given a special name, Divine Tree. Wolf Spirit Demon is a demonic spirit wielded by a leader werewolf. This monster lives in the lair of the heavenly dragon. There were 13 wolves in the world. 10 years have passed. Where are they now? That's what the girl was wondering. 3 of them found their place, and the rest scattered all over the world, and no one knows where they are now. The forest was full of rare medicinal herbs, rumored to be rich if you got out of the forest of the living. But thousands of people died chasing money, for not everyone was destined to enter this forest. Even mercenaries and nobles could not return back. The only tree that has remained since then is isolated and grows in the royal family. It is protected and kept away from people that might use them for bad purposes. That's why the divine tree is a very rare material. Even a small peel from it is worth a fortune, and Jemin was very lucky to get a whole branch of it. That's why it's dangerous to go to that forest. People who go there get lost and eventually just die. It's like the forest is cursed. Dr. Jemin wanted to show Luna something interesting, so he called her close to him to influence her. Only after losing many people did everyone realize that the forest was truly dangerous. Everyone would get into it and come back out. However, no one was ever able to do so. And then a local lord came up with a ruse. Jemin lit a candle and Luna thought he wanted to burn the branch she got him. She was right. Jemin put the match to the branch and watched the fire slowly reach it. She couldn't believe that not long ago he was talking about how hard it was to reach, and now he wanted to burn it. But later on, he did put out the match and started talking about how the forest was pretty good. But because of the rumors, it was all ruined. Eventually, the royal family hired a man who gathered a lot of day, and they all cut down the forest together. All the felled trees were processed and sold for an incredibly high price. The price was a life. Jemin noticed that Luna didn't tell about the family, what dynasty they belonged to. It seemed that Luna had said too much. Luna told Jemin a little about the guy. According to her observations, he was just like her. But the doctor didn't quite understand what she meant. Turns out the guy had a bad taste for animal blood, because he'd only drunk human blood once. Dr. Jemin gave it to her, and he said he was glad it was useful, but he was waiting for more details. She constantly had to pull him away from the sun so he wouldn't get burned. He didn't look after himself at all. Sometimes Luna had to wake him up herself. Luna thought back to the days when she forced the guy to drink blood. Because he completely refuses and was starving, she forcefully poured blood into him. After 1 bottle of blood, he fell asleep like a baby, fed and calm. That day, Luna was more annoyed than usual. She was annoyed that once again everything was happening as before. For the past few hundred years, Luna's heart had been calm. Only from time to time did she worry because of Scheffel. Although Luna's attitude was quite friendly, but she had never had this kind of attitude before. Luna even regretted interfering a little. She thought it would be better to leave him to die. It would be a quick and convenient death for him. After all, Luna's target was a guy and a girl. There was no connection between them and no reason to save them either. She had no reason to save him, and there were differences between them, and she was annoyed by the whole thing. He was lying so carefree in the sunlight. He closed his eyes against the sunlight. He knew it was dangerous for him under the sun, but he lay there anyway. He would starve to death soon. He was too much like the old Luna. She was also trying to die. She couldn't get used to the idea that she was alive. This made her even angrier. He was important to her in a way she didn't understand. She was completely furious at accepting these facts. Jemin had said that vampires like to create offspring, so it wasn't strange that the guy looked like her. After all, he was her follower. Louis could also be the opposite of her. Luna only shared part of her power with him. But Luna also felt what the follower felt. She didn't know what it meant, and Gemin started to think what to say. Luna felt the same range of emotions as the guy. When he panicked, it was reflected on her. When he was sad, she felt bad too. It was like a mental connection, but Gemin was ahead of the girl, saying that it was impossible. But at the same time, he was searching for answers in his head. Luna was worried that the guy felt the same way Luna felt, and Gemin concluded that the girl considered Louis as part of her family. But it turned out to be much simpler than that. They just fit together perfectly as host and host. Over time, this bond weakens and sometimes becomes stronger again. Luna cared if the guy felt the same way she did, but he had the rant for now. In time, he would feel it too, though Gemin wasn't completely sure of that. The research wasn't over. The girl thought over the doctor's words, but he interrupted her. Gemin had something for the girl and was about to hand it to her. He had a jar in his hands with purple contents that shimmered and glistened in the sunlight. He held it up to Mooney and offered her a drink of the poison. It seems he had prepared another sample of the poison for Luna, and it needed to be tried out. Gemin thought that this one should work, even though it was only a prototype. The girl wasn't at all sure whether to drink this poison or not, but even if it didn't work, Gemin could learn the reactions and effects, and therefore continue his experiments with new data. Luna wondered if it would hurt her, but it seemed the answer was too obvious, because it was poison and nothing good could come of it. When Fred and Cynthia failed to kill Luna, she suggested that the doctor create a poison, but it was hardly used in the original. Cynthia didn't use the poison that Gemin gave her, for she wanted to beat Luna with her own hands. The girl didn't know if the poison would work, but in any case, she turned to Gemin to die. And no matter what, hope is the last to die, even if there is almost no chance of success. Luna held out her hands and asked for Dr. Gemin to give her the poison. She decided to try it after all. The only thing she was doing all this for was death. Gemin looked at her with satisfaction. He is an inventor, and he is pleased to have a willing subject for his experiments with poisons. Oni handed the poison to the girl and asked her to drink it right now, so the doctor could analyze everything that would happen to the girl. Luna drank the contents of the vial and hoped that this would be her last memory. She would just drink it, and it would all go away. The girl drank all the poison to the last drop to make sure it worked, because she did not want to stay in this world at all. As soon as she drank it, she felt pain and blood flowed from her mouth, and her look changed a lot. Something went wrong. All she wanted to do was to die. She felt a terrible pain. Her mouth was bleeding and her insides were cutting. She couldn't stand such pain. She was asking for death. It was unbearable to bear it anymore. The girl screamed a lot. Her mouth was still bleeding. She was in a lot of pain, but she couldn't stop it. As a result, the girl collapsed on the floor and lay like that for a while, and Dr. Gemin stood nearby and just watched everything. It was only 1 minute. 1 minute of pain seemed like an eternity to the girl at that moment. She knew it wasn't long, but she was alive. All she experienced was the agony of hell, but she never died. While Luna was lying and looking at the ceiling, she heard someone's voice. She couldn't recognize it and had no idea who it belonged to, but she heard it clearly. Luna had already gotten up off the floor and was sitting up, and Gemin was taking stock of the situation. 1 minute or so wasn't enough. He needed to do more next time. Luna was somewhere in her thoughts and didn't take in Gemin's words. Something was bothering her, and you could tell by the look on her face she was remembering that voice she heard. The girl finally decided to come back to reality and clarified with Jamin what he had said to her. She didn't look like she was squirming in pain recently, but Gemin remained silent, though Luna was sure he had said no. But Gemin himself was sure that he hadn't said such a thing, and she had definitely imagined it. Gemin thought that Luna was just hallucinating. He thought it was another symptom, and Luna thought she was just imagining things. But Luna wasn't sure it was a hallucination. The voice was much louder than it was now. She felt like someone was whispering in her ear. The voice seemed too familiar, but she couldn't recognize who it belonged to yet. She had a bad feeling remembering that voice, but she couldn't figure out what it was. She decided to forget about it for now. We are now moving on to the Scheffel mansion. The girl had taken care of her business, and now she could finally get back to her duties. She knocked on Fred's door. She always did it with care. She was a little confused by the fact that she had 2 lives and 2 names. Lunier let it be known that it was her, and Fred let her in. Now he wasn't as rude as he had been before, so the girl relaxed a bit. Lunier opened the door and greeted the boy, immediately asking how he was doing and how he was feeling. She always smiled when she talked to him. Fred smiled too when he saw the teacher. Apparently, he was really happy to see her. It was only with her that he calmed down a bit and was a normal boy. Fred was reading a book. His father had told him to read it before lunch. Lunier had already decided that he had talked to his father, but they handed him the book through the door and put a note in it. He didn't even see his father face to face. Apparently, he just didn't want to and was afraid of hurting his family, so he avoided them so much. The girl sat down next to Fred and watched him read. Lunier was interested in the book that his father had told the boy to read. She decided to ask Fred what kind of book he was reading, but he immediately closed it and could not at first say what kind of book he was reading. But later she noticed the cover of the book. It was a book of monsters. His father had ordered the boy to study it so he would know what monsters existed. The girl read about the Hernon is a monster in the shape of a giant spider. It is used as a trap for hunting. The book had all the monsters' weaknesses written down. The girl was leafing through the book and reading about the different monsters that were described there. She was curious what monsters were included in it. There was a girl on the page, namely the Moon Lord. There was a lot of attention to her in the book. It seemed that they had already gathered information about her. There wasn't much information about her. Namely that she was supposedly a vampire, had silver hair and red eyes, and there was speculation that she wielded a sword or scythe. Everything was too strangely described in the book. The girl assumed that this book was written by Scheffel for personal use. After all, only the Scheffel family had seen the Master of the Moon for a long time. The girl couldn't believe that she hadn't seen the Scheffel family in hundreds of years, but she couldn't remember exactly when their last meeting had been, or how much time had passed. There was a story that the curse could only be broken by killing the Moon Master. This information was passed down from generation to generation so that their existence would not be forgotten. But in reality, all these are just excuses, because Luna wants to end this boring life as soon as possible. She realized that she has to try, because at the moment, even the strongest people will not be able to kill her at the moment. Fred read the book carefully and studied all the monsters that were described there, because he would need this knowledge in the future. Luna just looked at him and smiled. He was the one who could give her the peace she craved so much. The boy closed the book abruptly and said that he had already studied all the monsters, and now he wanted to play ball. They got the ball and went out to play. The girl promised the guy that they would have a glorious time. They had plenty of time. The girl got the ball and finally they can play. She took it in her hands and was going to throw it to the boy. The boy caught the ball and the girl praised him, because not many ordinary people can throw a ball safely. Fred was glad he was doing it. He didn't understand what he had to do and how to do it, but Luna smilingly explained to him that he just had to think about the fact that he was only using his arm strength. Luna told the boy to try to throw the ball to her. She knew it wouldn't be easy, and he didn't expect it to work so fast. Fred decided that his strength was similar to that of a normal person, so he had to be extremely careful. It had been a week since Lunier had started training Fred. The training was going smoothly. He was gradually learning to control his strength, but the unexpected strength that was suddenly revealed at such an early age was a problem. Anyway, it would all be resolved in time, but it was going too slow. But later, Fred heard someone's voice. It turns out they had brought him a snack, and his look immediately became fearful, for he had been avoiding people. But Luna immediately calmed him down. She told him to breathe deeply and slowly, and she would go and open the door. The girl only opened the door a little to see who was there. She thought that the man had come at a bad time. A servant stood in front of her. The man let it be known that he had brought them a snack. He bowed politely, showing his respect. But as soon as the girl wanted to take the food he brought, he immediately took it away from her. He explained by saying that he wanted to bring everything himself and arrange it as it should be. Luna let it be known that Fred still didn't feel like meeting people. The man said that he had been serving the boy for over 3 years, and the man was used to him, so there shouldn't be any problems. But the girl didn't let him pass. She said to just give her everything he brought, and she herself will put everything as it should be, and Fred will be calmer that way." The man looked at the girl unhappily, and even with a hint of aggression, clearly he didn't like her persistence. He looked furious. He said that only today he would yield to the teacher, but all the next times he would bring and arrange the food himself as needed. Something was wrong with this man. The girl took the food and entered the rooms. Fred table all tensed up in the center of the room and tried to calm down with the method the teacher recommended. The girl began to put the food on the table and pour drinks, at the same time clarifying whether the boy had calmed down because he looked tense. Fred heard a voice outside and even recognized it. The man's name was Jesse. The girl didn't let him in, and from the boy's behavior it was obvious that it was the right decision. Fred still avoided meeting people, but at the same time he didn't huddle in a corner even when he heard the voice. Luna came to the conclusion that there was progress in learning, and still there was progress. The girl was thinking of moving on to the next step. Many maids were cleaning the mansion while Benjamin called Luna to him. He was curious how his training was going. Fred was becoming more confident, and Benjamin wanted to know if he would be able to leave the room soon. The girl wasn't sure, but Scheffel said that he would like the boy to leave the room in 3 days. He didn't know if that was possible, so he called Lunaire. The girl wondered what was going to happen that Scheffel needed the guy out in exactly 3 days. It turns out there will be a party that the Scheffels organize every year. It will gather a lot of noble children, and Fred must be there for sure. Lunier let it be known that it's not really a good idea right now. He's just a child who has a very hard time making contact with even one person. If he meets so many people, he definitely won't be able to cope. Benjamin himself understood everything. But Fred is a child who will become the Duke of the Scheffel family in the future, and he already has a responsibility to fulfill. He has to meet the Emperor and many nobles, so he has to learn and get used to it from childhood. The palace is actually, as Benjamin believed, a den of snakes, and only monsters are found here. In order to survive in the palace, Fred needs to build many connections. For this, he needs to get to know his future allies step by step from a young age. Luna decided that Scheffel could just reschedule the party, but the party invitations were sent out months ago, so canceling the party would cause a lot of damage to the party. The girl finally understood Benjamin's position, nor could she promise him anything. All she said was that she would try her best to get Fred to attend the party in 3 days' time. The guys were playing ball, Fred was throwing the ball around, and finally the guy was getting his power under control. Luna decided that they were going to have a whole different level of training today. The guy realized what a different level of training meant. Immediately concluded that today they wouldn't be playing just the two of them, and someone else would be coming in as well. Luna watched the boy's reaction. She held the ball in her hands and watched his expression change. Eventually, the boy's hands trembled and he turned pale. Sweat droplets began to appear on his face. He was very afraid to step out of his comfort zone. Lunier came over to the boy and started to calm him down. After all, he should do the same things as before, and he didn't need to worry if someone came over. Fred calmed down a bit and asked Luna who it would be. It seems with the help of the teacher's encouragement, he made up his mind a bit about it. The girl told that person to come in, and a middle-aged man appeared in the room. He looked like a very serious and status man. He hadn't seen Fred in a while. He said hello to him from a distance and stood waiting for the teacher's instructions on the next course of action. Fred knew the man, and he didn't seem to be afraid of him. He called the man Sir Leon, and he seemed glad to see him, unlike the other characters. Sir Leon was very flattered that Fred remembered his name, and now remembered him. Not a bit of his formidable and serious face was left of him. He looked like a small child. He immediately moved to run closer to Fred to show how happy he was, but Luna grabbed him by the shoulder, letting him know he didn't need to do that. Leon was unhappy that Luna wouldn't let him approach. After all, he hadn't seen the Lord in a long time and didn't understand why he couldn't. But the answer was too obvious. He was still afraid. It seemed to dawn on Sir Leon why Luna wouldn't let him near the lad. He stood away from him at a safe distance, because if he hurt Leon, he would suffer again. Lunier repeated to Leon to restrain himself. After all, it was not because of her whim to do so. Leon immediately apologized and understood the whole situation. Lunier concluded that when it comes to the Scheffel family, all people become stupid and almost go crazy. She started to question if she should even get involved in this at all. She had brought Leon for a reason, to play with them too. It was risky, but she had to move forward and not just stand still. The ball was held by Lunier, and after everyone said they were ready, she started the game by tossing the ball into the air. The ball flew towards the man and he kicked it. Not expecting such a strong throw, he barely managed to kick it. Lunye immediately told him to shut up, so as not to confuse the boy and not to say too much. After all, Mr. Leon had already done it, so they just had to play in silence. Sir Leon didn't want to spoil the game. He just blurted out and couldn't help himself, even though the girl had recently reminded him to be more careful. The girl was curious how Duke Scheffel was feeling. They continued to play ball, but she spoke carefully. Sir Leon talks about what a gifted child Fred is. He is the most gifted of all. That's why they didn't find a good teacher for him, because if a teacher is weaker than his student, he is of little use. Luna was incredibly lucky to be in a family. Kylie Scheffel was the strongest in the family, except for Fred, of course. Since the Scheffel family had lived in the northern regions for generations, there was little opportunity to see them. Sir Leon spoke of how lucky the Scheffel family was that Earl Hernon had sent them an experienced teacher like her. He thought she was very talented and intelligent. Fred was familiar with the surname Hern. He seemed to know someone in the family and was immediately interested. He asked if Lunye had worked for the Hernon family before, and she said yes, almost confused by her own lies. His eyes lit up, and he asked if the teacher knew Judith Hernon and Louise Hernon. They seemed to have been his friends before he closed in here. Fred listened intently to Luna as she told him she had been these guys' teacher. Fred, meanwhile, was holding the ball in his hands, and his mood seemed to have changed. He launched the ball at Sir Leon, and it seemed to be too much force. The ball flew with great force and speed, and Sir Leon caught it, of course, but later felt a hell of a lot of pain. Now his hands were almost not obeying him. The ball was very heavy for him, and he couldn't move his hands. They hurt terribly and didn't obey him. He did not show any sign of pain, for the boy was looking straight at him. Sir Leon said it was just a heavier ball than he was used to, so he couldn't handle it, and apologized for the hiccup right away. Lunye confirmed that this was no ordinary ball, that it was custom-made for the games with Mr. Fred. She clapped her hands to let him know to stop the game. She decided to organize a small snack and take a short break, as everyone was getting a little tired. Sir Lent supported the idea, for his hands were aching terribly, but he hid it so that Fred would not shut himself in again. Sir Lent said goodbye, letting it be known that he was awfully glad to see Mr. Fred once more. He bowed to the boy and was about to leave. As soon as he turned around, Lunye noticed something wrong. She looked at his back and seemed to realize what had already happened to him during the game. She noticed that he had definitely sprained his wrists, and both of them. He was hiding his pain like a real fighter. For some time, he wouldn't be able to move his arms at all, but he didn't show it, and for Fred's sake, he was pretending well. The girl approached Fred, offering to play some more, but there was no answer yet. Something was going wrong again. It was obvious. He gloomed again. He lowered his head and said he wanted to end it all. Was Sir Leon not hiding his pain enough? The girl looked at the guy, and even got a little tired of his games. But she realized that she had no choice, and had to keep her nerves in hand, so that it wouldn't get worse. Everything started again, but the girl didn't understand for what reason. Did he notice that Leon was hurt because of him? If Fred stops learning, all the work will be wasted, and all the work that Lunye did will be in vain. She can be fired because of it, and there will be no further progress. Lunye suggested the guy to do something else, like reading books or playing board games, but the guy still sat with his head bowed and silent. The party was only 2 days away, and the girl wouldn't make it in 2. She left the guy, told him to eat and rest, and she'd be back tomorrow, but something kept her from leaving. Fred grabbed her by the arms and looked at her. He didn't seem to want the girl to leave him. He didn't want to be alone. Lunye lifted the boy in his arms and he got embarrassed. The girl immediately realized that the boy wanted her to stay, and of course she stayed by his side. She carried him to the bed and he shouted for her to let him go, but the girl reassured him that it would be much more pleasant for him to rest there. Lunye put the boy in the bed and he covered his head with a blanket out of embarrassment, but later he opened his eyes to see what the teacher was doing. Lunye sat next to him and reassured the boy that she wasn't going anywhere and would stay with him. Fred wondered why on earth she decided to stay, so he asked the teacher that. Lunter decided to tease the guy a little and asked if this question meant that she wanted the girl to leave, but the guy jumped up from the bed and let him know that she didn't. The girl told him that he is the master and heir of the Duke family and she is his servant, so she has no other choice at all. Lunar, the Lord of Lunar, was completely different from an ordinary person. She didn't divide people into ordinary people and nobles. For her, they were all equal, and her answer to the guy was just some kind of an excuse. After all, Jack Scheffel was a poor man eating scraps too. That's how Luna pictured the Scheffel family, and it all started with him. Since the birth of Fred, Luna had become too attached to him and to the whole Scheffel family. Apparently, the instinct of self-preservation is working, but the girl will still die at the hands of Fred, because it is her main goal. Fred could only talk to Lunaire so calmly, and she addressed him on the first name, but asked him to allow others to address him respectfully. But the boy did not like the idea. Luna asked if the boy would agree to such terms, but it seems that this question caught Fred off guard, and he was a little confused and didn't know what to say. But he seemed to question the survey. He wondered when they were alone how the teacher would address him. They wanted her to address him as you. Fred wanted her to address him the same way in private, and Luna decided that if that was the way he wanted to be addressed, then that was the way to go. Luna wondered if he would be able to go out in 2 days. The chance was slim, but very small. He might not be able to withstand that much pressure. The girl was very worried that this party might end in a disaster, and that was very real, considering the boy's condition. Alone with himself, Fred is easy. Controls his power, however, among people begins to worry and the power gets out of control, so he begins to hurt others. Today, even in the presence of one person, he almost lost control. Because the Duke was hurt, he didn't find himself at all, so he didn't want anything. It's like a vicious circle that goes on forever. But then he stopped her. He didn't let her leave. The real Luna would have definitely left, leaving the boy alone. This child decided to cut himself off from the outside world, and like a kitten huddled in a corner and never left his room. For him, there was only Lunaire. But now he is completely dependent on one person, namely the moon. So we can conclude that the results of the work are there. Lunaire had no choice and had to stay. Considering everything she thought, she was even a little confident that she could change Fred, because he would easily fall under her influence. The Scheffel mansion was packed with people. All the girls were dressed up in ball gowns. The fan that Benjamini Scheffel was talking about had finally arrived. Everyone was talking nicely amongst themselves and drinking drinks, but Fred was still nowhere to be seen. Benjamin went around the hall to say hello to all the important people, and it seems he met the Earl of Ceylon, and he noticed him too and went to say hello. They shook hands, summarizing that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. They smiled at each other, but they seemed to be hostile to each other. The Earl of Ceylon at once spoke of the many rumors that had been circulating about Benjamin's child. He was smiling at the time, but it was clear he wasn't just saying that. Benjamin let it be known that everything was fine, and Count Ceylon should not pay attention to the nonsense that others were talking about. But Benjamin also had something to say. He talked about the Count's son, saying that he was studying hard at the academy because he might be expelled. After saying that, the Count had sweat on his forehead. He wondered how Benjamin knew that his son was going to be expelled from the academy. After all, how much effort had been spent to keep it a secret. Anyway, according to the guest, today was a great day for a party. Outside was a banquet hall, decorated modestly, so Benjamin asked everyone to enjoy themselves. Benjamin walked from the Earl of Ceylon and bid him a polite farewell. All around, everyone was looking at Prince Benjamin. They were all wondering where his son Fred was. Benjamin heard the rumors that they were saying. Some said he was seriously ill. Some thought he had a scar all over his face. Some said he had gone mad. All the guests were only interested in one thing. Everyone who arrived had only come to find out if all the rumors about Fred Scheffel were true or not. They weren't interested in Benjamin, but his heir was a very interesting topic of discussion. Even when the most curious of them asked Benjamin about his son, he just smiled nervously and walked away. And that made them even more curious, because they wanted to know what he was hiding. Benjamin took a wine glass in his hands and tapped it with the instruments to create silence in the hall and to draw the attention of the guests to himself. He decided to make a speech. Today, people from all walks of life gathered in this mansion, but some couldn't come due to their busy schedules. Duke Louis said that he couldn't come and greet in person. In addition, Benjamin said that his son had a runny nose, so he would only come out to greet the guests. All the guests froze in one place as they waited for this moment. Fred's feet stepped uncertainly on the steps, but he went forward because he had no choice. He had to go out with his head held high and fulfill his appointment for today. His teacher was beside him, for with her he was not so afraid to show himself in public, and he would not be so nervous. When she was around, the boy was much calmer. His hands were trembling, but he did not let go of his teacher's hand for a second, because that way he could at least keep himself in control. He came out and thanked everyone for choosing to come to this party. He bowed politely to show his appreciation. Everyone was surprised. They didn't expect Fred to come out and be quite normal without any changes. They couldn't believe their eyes, and couldn't believe that all the rumors about Fred Scheffel were just rumors. The boy was barely hanging on, and they were washing his bones. The teacher noticed a strong interest in Fred that would throw him off his game. He clutched Lundberg's hand tightly, and if it had been anyone else instead, his bones would be just crushed right now, but Lunier was no ordinary one. Fred was given permission to go back to his room. Everyone patted his greeted, and the boy and his teacher went to his room. He felt relieved. All that was left was to reach his room without adventure. As soon as the door closed, Fred fell to the floor. He was very tense. It was good that Lunier was with him. Without her, it could have ended badly. The girl praised the boy and stroked his head, and it even calmed him down a bit. A blush appeared on his cheeks, and he was not pale. Fred said it was because the teacher was holding his hand. He felt so good and calm. Even though he was worried, he felt comfortable with her. The girl looked at him surprised, and Fred waited to see how the girl would react to what she said. It was important to him because he had opened up to her. But Lunier started laughing, and Fred got even more embarrassed and a little angry. The teacher asked the boy if he was hungry, but he didn't care about food right now. She was the only one who gave him nothing but warmth and care. But Lunier decided to go down and get him something to eat. As soon as she closed the door of the room, she stood leaning against the door. Something seemed to be bothering her. Her hands were trembling. Luckily, the problem was solved for her. Something was still bothering her, namely the fact that Fred had been able to withstand the humans only because of her, Lord Luna. But that meant Fred was dependent on her. Without her, he couldn't control his power. But on the other hand, Fred is still very young now. As he grows up, he won't remember his teacher. But even if he does, it won't matter to Luna and everyone else, because she'll be dead. In the finale of the original installment, when Fred defeats Luna's master, his power takes on a new level. The girl went down to get food and heard others talking. Some were talking about the other's children and trying to find out details. Some were talking about His Majesty. Others talked about the Imperial Palace and were jealous that they had a helper like the Hernon family. The girl decided to give Fred some cake and was just slicing it, for Fred loved sweets as much as the children did. As someone came up to her and stood right next to the gay, did not move away, the girl did not look up. But later she realized who it was who had decided to say hello to her. Earl Hernon was the same who had been invited to the banquet, and this time he came. They decided to go through to make sure she was safe, and also the girl decided that he didn't know yet about the new sting in her mansion, which Luna decided to take with her after all. Luna put a piece of cake on him, and he thanked her for her concern, and decided to deflect already. He was very careful with her in public, although in private he was almost licking her slippers. Benjamin Scheffel came up to them. He talked about the fact that they had finally met, and decided that Lunier was very tired, and asked where her precious apprentice was. Benjamin also noticed that Count Hernon had come to their party for the first time. He hoped he had enjoyed the Scheffels' party, but Hernon wanted to speak privately with his longtime employee. But that confused Benjamin, now an employee of the Scheffel family. But still, he just thanked Hernon for giving them such a great teacher for Fred. But they didn't seem to be friendly. There was a spark between them, and they obviously didn't like each other, but for some unknown reason. Luna watched all this and didn't understand what was going on, why the Hernon and Scheffel families were so hostile to each other. There was no reason for it. Luna wondered why they were so nervous about answering each other's questions. Something wasn't right with them, and Luna would surely ask later on. He came over to her and told her that if anything happened to the Scheffels, he could always go back to the Hernon mansion. According to Alan, the door of the Hernon mansion was always open to her, but it was not open to her as a babysitter, but for any reason at all. Luna didn't understand what they were doing and decided to leave so as not to become the cause of their quarrel. Besides, she had to take the touricity to Fred. There was a festive atmosphere around, but Lunier didn't like parties like this, so there was no point in staying. All she wanted to do was to get out of here quickly. As soon as she got to the door of Fred's room, she calmed down a little, because it was very noisy and the atmosphere was unpleasant. The girl held a cake for Fred and sighed with relief that she was able to get away from those two who could not share her. But later she noticed that there was a folded sheet in her hand. How and when it had been handed to her, she could not understand. But she realized that it was a letter from Hernon. She thought it was a rather clever way of sending the letter, for it was about the size of a small piece of paper. Alan Hernon was quite cunning, and she knew it. He pretended to pass her a piece of cake and ended up passing her the letter, and whispered in her ear when Benjamin dialed, doing it on purpose to provoke him. She realized that Alan Hernon was doing all this for a reason. He must have had a purpose and a reason for all these actions. But she decided not to go into all that for the time being and just opened the letter. Only 3 months left, and they still couldn't find the place where the girl they needed was. Luna was very worried to hear that this time too, Hernon had no good news. He was looking for just one child, namely Cynthia, the main heroine of this world. She is needed for Fred to defeat Luna, and she can finally leave this world. The party at Scheffel's mansion was over, and it had been a few days. The girl had enough worries, and she was nervous that Cynthia couldn't be found. But there was another problem. Fred was feverish. He had a fever and couldn't get out of bed. He held his teacher's hand as before, and she comforted him. After all, he had to keep himself in control now. The doctor had come, and he must make an examination to help the boy and prescribe new medicines. Lunier slowly let go of Fred's hand and told him that he would do fine. Before, he could only make contact with others when he held her hand. But now there was no such opportunity. Fred confirmed that he would manage and waited for the doctor to begin his examination. The boy himself looked exhausted. He was feeling very ill, which was why he let the doctor near him. The doctor understood the situation, so he let the teacher know that he would examine him quickly, so as not to cause the boy any emotions, and not to make him nervous and hold back. The girl, after the doctor finished examining him, left Fred's room, and she was already waiting for him on the threshold of his room. The teacher, by the way, went out immediately after her. He did not want to be alone with the guy. She was met by Benjamin Scheffel, but was very concerned about Fred's well-being. The teacher was the only one who knew, besides the doctor, how he was feeling, so Benjamin came to her for answers. Fred has a fever and a swollen throat. All symptoms point to a cold, but it's not the flu. Benjamin asked if the doctor was sure of his conclusions, because the boy's health is important. In the Scheffel family, from generation to generation, there were rarely any cases of serious illnesses. They were stronger than ordinary people and had a strong immune system, unlike the rest of the world. But Benjamin was very worried, because even if it was rare, there were still diseases. But he thanked the teacher Lunier, because if it was not for her, there was no telling what could have happened, because he was only looking for her. The doctor immediately began to reassure the prince because everything went well. After all, the symptoms showed that the disease is not so serious, and the doctor gave him medication. Now it remains only to monitor his condition, and in time he will recover. Luna went back to Fred's room to look after him, for she was the only one who could do that. No one had noticed how indispensable she had become in the Scheffel family. Fred heard a knock on the door and immediately decided to check who entered the room, because he was happy to see only the teacher. But later, when he saw that it was Lunaire, he calmed down a bit. He immediately got up, because he was happy to see her. But Lunier ordered him to lie down and not to get up, because his body is very weak now and he needs a lot of rest and not to be nervous. Fred started to apologize to Luna, but the teacher saw no reason to apologize at all and told Fred about it, because he had done nothing wrong. He had done nothing at all. Fred realized that his dad and everyone else was worried about him, and because he made them nervous, he apologized, but the teacher reassured him that it was just a cold and he would get better soon. She told him to lie down and breathe deeply, and he would get better, and he could play ball with her again like he used to. He obeyed the teacher. He trusted Lunier, so he would do whatever she said. The girl once again repeated that the disease is serious, and soon everything will pass and the guy will get better, so he should not worry and apologize. And her words were not empty. There were very few cases of serious illnesses in the Scheffel family tree, and considering Fred's gift, it means that he was born with a strong immunity, so the boy will recover soon. The party was the first step in his recovery and control of his power, though not without the help of Luna, but it was a plus in the current situation. After the public greeting, Fred wasn't as bothered when passing other people. Besides, his power started to slowly adapt to the environment and his body. It was because of this that Fred got sick. The pain in his body is quite a good sign. When it passes, Fred will be in full control of his power and will be able to contact other people. The girl was sitting by Fred's bed and taking care of him. She asked him if he needed to change the scarf on his forehead, but he said he didn't need to. He didn't want to bother the teacher. Even though the girl realized that everything would be all right, she was still worried watching his painful condition. She told him to drink warm water and go to sleep. It would make him feel better. The boy obeyed and drank the water. As he was about to go to sleep, he asked Lunye a question. He wondered if she still played with him when he recovered. It was important for him to know that. He talked about the day when the girl had thrown him a ball in the garden without thinking, but he said he really liked that game. He somehow realized it was her, but how? He talked about how he wanted to play with the teacher again and smiled. The girl was trying to digest how he knew that she had thrown him the ball that day in the garden, but she was even more surprised that now he only cared about that. He wanted to play with her. But the boy was a little upset because he thought that the teacher didn't want to play with him anymore. She of course said that they would, and great more when he recovered, and Prince Benjaminite would let them play. The boy was pleased with the answer, and little by little he closed his eyes. The girl left him alone, saying she would bring medicine and some candy. She got up and covered the boy with a blanket and decided to leave his room for a while, letting him know that she would be back soon. The girl went down the stairs and thought about the boy's condition, namely about when he would get better. For some reason, she felt warm feelings for him. He was not only a death to her, there was something more there. She knocked on the doctor's office, for she needed to get more medicine for Fred. She hoped the doctor was there and she wouldn't have to wait long. The doctor opened the door but could not recognize Lunye. He immediately asked if something was wrong with Mr. Fred. Later, he remembered that she was just the boy's teacher, but still decided to ask what happened to them. She said she came to pick up the next dose of medicine for the boy, but the doctor said that he had given her the medicine, although it was strange because the girl was sure that she had not come to the doctor's office to get the medicine yet. The doctor said that earlier, the servant of the master came and took the medicine. His face was familiar, so the doctor just gave him the medicine. The girl realized who it was and immediately thought of Fred. She immediately ran to see what was wrong with Fred. The teacher opened the door of the room and she didn't like what she saw. The same blonde man who had wanted to put the food out last time was standing by the bed, and Fred was awake but sitting on the bed, shivering with fear. The servant didn't seem to be paying any attention to it. His look looked ominous. He was flattered that the teacher remembered him, and he certainly knew that sooner or later she would fly into this room. But it was already too late. Fred was trembling with fear. But the boy didn't care. He introduced himself as Hoban, the master's servant, the last time he brought food to Fred. But Fred didn't listen to him at all. He said he'd come to bring the medicine the doctor ordered, but it seems the teacher had already brought it. He was making a carefree face. He didn't seem to realize what he'd just done. The girl wasn't interested in his excuses, so she went over to Fred. Hoban said he was just trying to help, but the girl was only interested in Fred. She asked him if he was all right and approached him gently. As a result, he hit her on the arm, so that even on her arm there was a red mark, and she felt pain, although it didn't hurt at all before. She was surprised that she felt the blow, and also that the boy could hit her at all, because not so long ago he had seen in her only protection and support. He had always been calm around her. Fred realized that he had hit the teacher, and after realizing this fact in his eyes there were tears. He realized what he had done, and immediately asked if the teacher was angry with him, because he hurt her. The girl immediately began to calm the guy, letting him know that nothing terrible had happened and she was not hurt at all. But she herself was thinking about what this servant was thinking, and who asked him to do all this at all. She realized that she had no choice, so she put her hand behind the boy's back and started to use her power, because she had no other choice. The boy was too nervous. Apparently, he was really emotionally exhausted, and all he needed to do was sleep and get his strength back. She was lucky she was there in time to calm him down. Otherwise, things could have turned out much worse. She covered Fred, who was sound asleep, with a blanket. He did look serene. Even though she had used her power, she had no choice now. The man who was still standing in the room started to apologize for what he had done. He talked about how he didn't think it would turn out this way, and he had no intention of doing anything on purpose. The girl did not want to believe in her words. She worked hard to make the boy become more calm, no longer anxious, yes, and he even now hit the teacher, though it had never happened before. The servant of the master became frightened by her look. It instilled fear in him, and he immediately began to step back a little. Because his legs and hands were trembling from her look, she frightened him not to a joke. The girl decided to find out the real reason for his antics, but the servant said that he just wanted to help the master, and he had no intention of harming him or spoiling everything. But Lunye didn't believe him, and let him know that was not the reason for his antics, and the servant was surprised at her insolence and the way she talked to him. But anyway, he wasn't going to back down. Later, he just started laughing for no apparent reason, as if nothing bad had happened. On the contrary, he had the opportunity to watch the circus. The master's servant finally spoke openly and told the teacher to talk to him honestly too, because he wasn't going to hide anymore. He talked about the girl being alone with the master and getting greedy for the young man's attention, even if she thinks it's her job. It's still inappropriate in his opinion. But in the servant's opinion, Lunye is just a teacher, and sooner or later she will be thrown out, and he is a servant of the Lord that faithfully serves him and will serve him until his death, unlike the teacher. He was a servant of the Duke, and the purpose of his life is to be a loyal subject of his master and not to let anyone near him, although he tolerated all this shame. But everything has its limit. He had never seen the Duke as happy around him as he was with her. He didn't want to spoil their relationship, but gradually he was beginning to have doubts about the teacher. He was very upset when he found out that the young gentleman had locked himself in his room and was not letting anyone in or contacting anyone. He just didn't know what to do. After all, the gentleman was very aggressive, and the servant was even afraid to approach him and ask him something. He did not want to anger him more, so he avoided contact with him, so as not to make it worse neither for himself nor for him. There was a moment when he decided to give the dessert to the master, but later he flew out of the room. He was shaking with fear, and his colleagues calmed him down as much as they could. The servant himself considered the guy as a monster. He didn't know what the teacher was doing to him, but his condition had improved, and he was no longer throwing himself at everyone. He thought that if he interfered now, he would be the next Duke's assistant. He talked to Lunye about how all this time he only wanted to see the teacher and no one else. He wondered what she had told him that had changed the boy so much. Honestly, said Lunye herself was worried that he was only in contact with her, but there was nothing they could do for now. He asked that the girl tell him her secret, and together they could achieve a great result. Lunye stared at him silently. She saw through him and realized that he wasn't interested in Fred. He just wanted power, and that was all. Inside, Lunye accumulated anger and aggression, and the second this annoying servant, because he meddles and says a lot of unnecessary things, he spoils everything. He said words to Fred that just like that knocked him out and made him so nervous and tense, he not only entered without permission, he also said nasty things to the boy. And it was he who influenced others with words and actions that belittled the man. He acted low, but he didn't care. He wanted to achieve his goal by any means necessary, even the most vile. He was the one who told Fred that the teacher was mad at him. It was the poet who made his anxiety rise, and he sat there crying and was very scared. When he said this, he thought the teacher was suffering sitting next to him every day. A 10-year-old boy is not yet ready to confront such words against him, and of course he took it all to heart and went out of his way, because of anger and resentment that no one wants him. Besides, he is too weak to think straight now, so he didn't even think before taking these words seriously. The man thought the teacher was a bad influence on Fred. She was very angry. She couldn't believe that he dared to talk to her like that and to meddle in her affairs. But she also thought that he was a terrible influence on Fred if he said such nasty things. He couldn't believe that she had let him say such things to her. He was very angry, but then he noticed that it was much darker than before, and there was a figure in front of him. They were looking at her fearfully, and those eyes were shining brightly. He was immediately frightened and screamed, and Lunye hoped that he would not come to the door of Fred's room again and stand them alone. The shout echoed throughout the mansion. All this servant was good at was shouting, for they stiffened at the sight of Luna. He pissed her off so much that she couldn't stand it and used her power. The guards burst into the room when they heard the scream and immediately began to worry about Fred's health and well-being. But they did not see anything special. Everything was fine as far as it was possible. Lunar was sitting by Fred's bed and tending to him when they burst in. She looked at them questioningly, not understanding what had happened. But later, one of the guards noticed a man lying on the floor. Later, Benjamin Scheffel came in to find out what kind of chaos was going on in Fred's room. He saw Hoban, who was lost in this reality and was not thinking but laughing. He ordered to take Hoban to another room because he doesn't belong here, especially in such a state. It was as if Hoban had lost his mind. He just stammered and couldn't even walk normally. He had no idea why he had come here and made so much noise, because his son was resting here, and it was undesirable to disturb him, and for some reason, Hoban had not thought of that. But Benjamin decided to pay attention to his son and immediately asked how he felt. Fred was better, because the girl had put him to sleep with the help of her powers, and he was not bothered by anything now. Benjamin ordered everyone to be quiet, because the child was resting and he was sick, and everyone around him was making noise. Come to think of it, this was the first time Benjamin had entered his son's room in a long time.